Να ξαναπώ καλησπέρα σε όλους. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την εδώ παρουσία σας. Κάποιοι από τους εκλεκτούς προσκεκλημένους μας δεν κατάφεραν να είναι μαζί μας απόψε και αναφέρομαι στον κύριο Σταύρο Μαλά, διευθυντή του Ινστιτούτου Κύπρου, καθώς και στον κύριο Άνταμ Σάμσπλουκ, αναπληρωτή αρμοστή του Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου, και επειδή δυστυχώς προέκυψε κάτι και έτσι η παρουσία τους εδώ δεν κατέστη εφικτή. Έχουμε όμως την ιδιαίτερη τιμή και χαρά να είναι μαζί μας η κυρία Έλενα Χατζικάκου, διευθύντρια του Παιδαγωγικού Ινστιτούτου Κύπρου. Να αναφέρω για την κυρία Έλενα Χατζικάκου ότι ήταν ένα από τα μέλη της ομάδας που εισήγαγαν τους υπολογιστές στην εκπαίδευση. Επίσης, έχουμε ιδιαίτερη χαρά και τιμή να είναι μαζί μας η κυρία Φωτini και η κυρία Κύπρου, εκπροσωπώντας το Υφυπουργείο Πολιτισμού. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Ευχαριστούμε και όλους εσάς που είστε μαζί μας απόψε, αγαπητοί προσκεκλημένοι. Και θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω στο STEM Education Center, το οποίο συστεγάζεται με το Μουσείο Υπολογιστών Κύπρου, για να γιορτάσουμε μαζί την Παγκόσμια ημέρα της γυναίκας, μια ημέρα αφιερωμένη στην αναγνώριση των εκπαιδευμάτων, της δημιουργικότητας, της επινοητικότητας των γυναικών σε όλο τον κόσμο. Σε έναν κόσμο που εξελίσσεται ραγδαία, οι γυναίκες καλούνται να διαδραματίσουν έναν χρήσιμο ρόλο, στην επιστήμη, την τεχνολογία, την μηχανική, τα μαθηματικά. Εμείς, στο εκπαιδευτικό μας κέντρο, πιστεύουμε ότι κάθε κορίτσι έχει τη δυνατότητα να διαπρέψει στον τομέα του STEM. Η επιτυχία είναι δικαίωμα κάθε κοριτσιού που τολμά να κάνει μεγάλα όνειρα και τα όνειρα αυτά μπορεί να τα κωδικοποιεί, να τα σχεδιάζει, να τα κατασκευάζει, ώστε τελικά να αφήσει ένα ισχυρό αποτύπωμα στον τομέα με τον οποίο θα ασχοληθεί. Όπως ισχυρό, ανεξίτηλο θα έλεγα, είναι και το αποτύπωμα στην ιστορία των ψηφιακών παιχνιδιών των 4 γυναικών Storytellers που τιμούμε απόψε. Οι 4 αυτές μεγάλες δημιουργοί αποτελούν πηγή έμπνευση για όλους μας. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Καλησπέρα και από εμένα. Εγώ είμαι η Κατερίνα Θεοδωρίδου από το Center for Social Innovation, το Κέντρο Κοινωνικής Καινοτομίας. Συνεργάτητα και φίλη του Αλεξάνδρου από χρόνια. Δέχτηκα την πρόσκληση του να κάνω facilitate σήμερα τη συζήτηση μας με πάρα πολύ χαρά. Είπαν αρκετά πράγματα για το γιατί είμαστε απόψε εδώ, για τις 4 γυναίκες που θα δούμε έτσι λίγο μετά τη δουλειά που έχουν καταφέρει μέσα από την αφήγηση και τα δίκαια της. Εσείς θέλετε να αυτό μόνο, εντάξει. Και έτσι να προχωρήσουμε στο πρόγραμμα μας. Ξεκινούμε με έναν χαιρετισμό από τον κύριο Αλκή Σπύρου, ο οποίος είναι πρόεδρος του Κυπριακού Δικτύου του Ινστιτούτου Μηχανικής και Τεχνολογίας και πρόεδρος του Παγκόσμιου Συμβουλίου του Ινστιτούτου Μηχανικής και Τεχνολογίας. Θα θέλαμε να τον καλέσουμε για έναν έτσι μικρό χαιρετισμό για απόψε.
Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Απολογούμε που δεν μπόρεσα να έρθω. Βλέπετε, είμαι στο δρόμο Εκ μέρους του Ινστιτούτου Μηχανικής και Τεχνολογίας θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω τον Αλέξανδρο για την ευκαιρία που μας δίνει. Το Ινστιτούτο Μηχανικής και Τεχνολογίας είναι ένα παγκόσμιο Ινστιτούτο το οποίο εδρεύει στο Λονδίνο με 160.000 μέλη και όπου δίνουμε μεγάλη σημασία στα θέματα της γυναίκας και προώθησης του STEM στα κορίτσια. Θα ήθελα επίσης να ευχαριστήσω τον Αλέξανδρο για την ευκαιρία που μας δίνει κάθε φορά στις εκδηλώσεις του, να είμαστε συνδιοργανωτές και όντας ένας που γεννήθηκε τη δεκαετία του 80, ανυπομονώ να απολαύσω τις γυναίκες Storytellers σχετικά με τα επιτεύγματά τους στην τεχνολογία. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε, κύριε Σπύρου. Θα προχωρήσουμε με την αγαπημένη μας την Παναγιώτα Πολυκάρπου, που είναι online μαζί μας. Η Παναγιώτα επίσης και συνεργάτηδα από χρόνια. Είναι κοινωνική καινοτόμος, είναι βασικά social innovator και υπέρμαχος της ισότητας των φύλων στην Κύπρο. Συνίδρυσε το 2021 το Girls in STEAM Academy, το οποίο είναι μια μη κερδοσκοπική πρωτοβουλία που στοχεύει στη μείωση του χάσματος των φύλων στους τομείς STEAM, δηλαδή στην επιστήμη, τεχνολογία, μηχανική, τέχνες και μαθηματικά. Και είναι επίσης και η πρόεδρος του Pianala Foundation. Είναι ένα NGO το οποίο ιδρύθηκε. Και επίσης συνήθισε την πρωτοβουλία τα αρχαιολόγια, που μπορεί να έχετε να το δείτε τα τελευταία χρόνια, την πρώτη ψηφιακή πλατφόρμα στην Κύπρο, που προωθεί την ισότητα των φύλων. Απόψε θα μας μιλήσει για αυτά τα θέματα, το fostering equality. Φαντάζομαι θα μας πείτε τις εμπειρίες από το Girls in STEAM Academy, τις ευκαιρίες που δίνει σε κοπέλες, σε κορίτσια βασικά, νέα κορίτσια, για να έχουν αυτή την εμπειρία να βιώσουν το STEAM. Τι σημαίνει για αυτά. Παναγιώτα μου, καλώς όρισες.
Χαίρετε. Ευχαριστώ, Κατερίνα μου, για την εισαγωγή. Χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που είμαι πιο εγώ μαζί σας. Δυστυχώς δεν μπορούσα να είμαι παρούσα στην Κύπρο, γιατί είμαι στο εξωτερικό. Αλλά με πολύ χαρά έτσι, θα μοιραστούμε και εμείς τη δουλειά που κάνουμε στον Girls System Academy, με αφορμή και την αυριανή μέρα. Όντως, είναι μια σημαντική μέρα να υπενθυμίζουμε το τι πρέπει να γίνει ακόμα στο συγκεκριμένο τομέα και στα συγκεκριμένα θέματα. Ετοίμασα έτσι μια παρουσίαση, την οποία υπέθεσα ότι η συζήτηση θα γίνει στα αγγλικά, επομένως την έκανα στα αγγλικά, παρόλα αυτά εγώ να μιλώ στα ελληνικά. Επομένως, απλά επιβεβαιώστε μου ότι βλέπετε εντάξει τώρα, άλλαξα slide και το βλέπετε εντάξει. Ναι, τέλεια. Λοιπόν, το Girls System Academy, λοιπόν, ναι, είναι μια μη κερδοσκοπική πρωτοβουλία κάτω από το μη κερδοσκοπικό ίδρυμα Γίνε Σύμμαχος, το οποίο έχει δράσεις από το 2020, όπως ανέφερε η Κατερίνα, ξεκινήσαμε με το Θκιολόγια. Εγώ θα σταθώ κυρίως στη δράση μας του Girls System Academy, το οποίο συνίδρυσα μαζί με την Αναστασία Λιοπετρίτη το 2021. Η Αναστασία είναι και μαζί σας στο κοινό. Επομένως, αν θέλετε περισσότερες πληροφορίες, μπορείτε να αποτάθετε και στην Αναστασία. Ξεκινήσαμε τον Girls System Academy χωρίς να είμαστε Girls in STEAM. Ούτε εγώ ούτε η Αναστασία έχουμε υποβαθρό οι σπουδές στα θέματα STEM. Παρόλα αυτά, επειδή ακριβώς ασχολούμαστε με τα θέματα φύλου γενικότερα σαν επαγγελματίες και από προσωπική μας εμπειρία, παρατηρήσαμε πως τα στερεότυπα και οι προκαταλήψεις που αντιμετωπίζουν οι γυναίκες στα συγκεκριμένα επαγγέλματα ξεκινούν από πολύ μικρή ηλικία, από τον τρόπο που εμείς εσωτερικεύουμε τα δικά μας στερεότυπα και προκαταλήψεις. Και όπως δείχνουν και πάρα πολλές έρευνες, έχουμε και άλλες διαστάσεις οι οποίες συμβάλλουν στο να έχουμε την υποεκπροσώπηση των γυναικών στα επαγγέλματα. Κάνω αυτή την εισαγωγή γιατί να βοηθηθείτε να καταλάβετε και εσείς πιο μετά γιατί επιλέξαμε τη μεθοδολογία που επιλέξαμε. Ξέρουμε ότι η έλλειψη γυναικών προτύπων είναι ένας λόγος που οι γυναίκες, και κορίτσια συγκεκριμένα, δεν μπορούν να οραματιστούν, να δουν τον εαυτό τους στα συγκεκριμένα επαγγέλματα. Ξέρουμε επίσης ότι στερεότυπα που αντιμετωπίζονται, που τα ακούμε συχνά στο σχολείο, στο σχολικό περιβάλλον, στο οικογενειακό περιβάλλον, επηρεάζουν τις επιλογές καριέρας τους, ενσωματώνονται επηρεάζουν το πώς οι ίδιες αξιολογούν τον εαυτόν τους. Επομένως, έχουμε έρευνες που δείχνουν ότι όντως, αν εγώ πιστεύω ότι δεν είμαι καλή στα μαθηματικά, η πεποίθησή μου επηρεάζει και την απόδοση μου. Επομένως, βλέπουμε διάφορες παραμέτρους και παράγοντες, οι οποίοι ξέρουμε ότι από την εφηβική ηλικία, ακόμα και ξεκινώντας από τα 6 συγκεκριμένα, επηρεάζει το πώς τα κορίτσια βλέπουν τον εαυτόν τους σαν επαγγελματίες και σε ποιους τομείς θέλουν να ακολουθήσουν. Ξεκίνησε λοιπόν το Cyprus Academy με στόχο να μειώσει αυτό το χάσμα υποεκπροσώπησης γυναικών και κοριτσιών στα συγκεκριμένα επαγγέλματα. Αυτή έτσι μια μικρή εισαγωγή. Γιατί το κάνουμε, γιατί ακριβώς θέλουμε να παρέχουμε έναν περιβάλλον, μια σειρά από δράσεις, εκπαιδευτικά προγράμματα, ευκαιρίες δικτύωσης, όπως να δούμε μετά, που έρχονται να αντιμετωπίσουν ό,τι προανέφερα. Την αντιμετώπιση των στερεοτύπων, την περιορισμένη πρόσβαση τόσο σε εκπαιδευτικά προγράμματα, αλλά και σε πληροφόρηση, την έλλειψη έμπνευσης, την μειωμένη επαφή με γυναίκες πρότυπα, γιατί ένας από τους επιπρόσθετους λόγους είναι και η έλλειψη μάλλον ενός δικτύου, ενός support system. Επομένως, αυτοί είναι, ας πούμε, οι 4 τα κύρια γιατί μας, γιατί κάνουμε ό,τι κάνουμε. Το Cyprus Academy, λοιπόν, τα τελευταία σχεδόν 4 χρόνια, τώρα είμαστε στον 5ο κύκλο δράσεων, ό,τι προσφέρει και ό,τι υλοποιεί, έχει κάποιες έτσι, ας το πούμε, πυλώνες, στους οποίους εντάσσουμε τις δράσεις μας. Ο πρώτος πυλώνας είναι η εκπαίδευση. Οτιδήποτε έχει να κάνει με την εκπαίδευση γυναικών και κοριτσιών, που να εξηγήσουμε και στη συνέχεια παραπάνω, η δικτύωση, η επαφή με την αγορά εργασίας, η επαφή με άλλα κορίτσια, η επαφή με γυναίκες πρότυπα, αλλά και η ενημέρωση, το awareness που κάνουμε στην ευρύτερη κοινωνία, γιατί δεν είναι μόνο αρκετό να ενδυναμώνουμε τα κορίτσια, έχουν αντίστοιχο ρόλο και ευθύνη οι γονείς, οι κηδεμόνες, οι εκπαιδευτικοί, η κοινωνία ως σύνολο, τα αγόρια. Επομένως, αυτή είναι, ας το πούμε, οι στρατηγικές μας προτεραιότητες τα τελευταία χρόνια που κάνουμε δράσεις. Και να πάω λίγο πιο συγκεκριμένα στα προγράμματά μας, για να καταλάβετε και τη μεθοδολογία. Και θα καταλήξω με το να πούμε περισσότερες πληροφορίες για τη συνεργασία που έχουμε με το μουσείο, γιατί είμαστε ιδιαίτερα περήφανοι για μια συνεργασία που ξεκίνησε φέτος και να σταθώ παραπάνω και στη μεθοδολογία μετά. Επομένως, το Cyprus Academy προσφέρει δράσεις κάτω από αυτούς τους πυλώνες εντελώς δωρεάν και συγκεκριμένα η πρώτη μας δράση, και μέχρι σήμερα αποτελεί την κύρια μας δράση, είναι τα προγράμματα Bridge Team. Τα προγράμματα Bridge Team απευθύνονται σε κορίτσια ηλικίας 14 με 18 και έχουν μια συγκεκριμένη προσέγγιση, η οποία βασίστηκε σε καλές πρακτικές που είδαμε να υπάρχουν στο εξωτερικό, πολλές βασισμένες και σε έρευνα. Και τούτον, αυτές συμπεριλαμβάνουν, να πω αρχικά, το κύρια δραστηριότητα του προγράμματος, του διήμερου προγράμματος που προσφέρεται, είναι το εργαστήρι τεχνολογίας. Οι συμμετέχουσες έρχονται στο πρόγραμμα Σάββατο πρωί μέχρι Σάββατο απόγευμα, Κυριακή το ίδιο. Επομένως, σε 2 μέρες περνούν το περισσότερο χρόνο τους μαζί μας με το να μαθαίνουν μια καινούρια δεξιότητα. Και αυτή είναι η δεξιότητα του προγραμματισμού. Συγκεκριμένα, χτίζουν τη δική τους ιστοσελίδα μέσα σε λίγες ώρες. Γιατί το κάνουμε τούτο? Γιατί, καταρχήν, δεν θέλουμε disclaimer να πούμε ότι δεν θέλουμε όλες να ασχοληθούν με την τεχνολογία. Αν τους κινήσει το ενδιαφέρον, γιατί όχι. Αλλά ο στόχος, και το τι ξέρουμε, αν το δούμε από την πίσω πλευρά του τι γίνεται όταν μαθαίνουν την δεξιότητα, σπάζουν ένα σημαντικό στερεότυπο, το οποίο είναι το στερεότυπο ότι ο προγραμματισμός είναι δύσκολος και ο προγραμματισμός είναι για τα αγόρια. Στερεότυπο το οποίο οι ίδιες οι συμμετέχουσες τα τελευταία 4 χρόνια μας λένε διαρκώς ότι ακούνε και από τους γονείς τους, αλλά κυρίως δυστυχώς και από καθηγητές, καθηγήτριες στο σχολείο, και το εστερνίζονται, το ενσωματώνουν. Επομένως, όταν σε 7 ώρες, μέσα σε 2 μέρες, βλέπουν ότι ο προγραμματισμός τελικά είναι τόσο δύσκολο. Μπορεί να μην τους αρέσει, μπορεί να μην τους ενθουσιάσει, αλλά βλέπουν ότι έκαμα το. Έστησα τη δική μου ιστοσελίδα ξεκινώντας από το 0. Επομένως, αυτή η δράση ενδυνάμωσης που λαμβάνει μέρος σε ένα Σαββατοκύριακο είναι και η βάση του τι θέλουμε εμείς να προσφέρουμε. Παράλληλα, πετάγομαι στο τρίτο σημείο, που είναι η δικτύωση με γυναίκες πρότυπα. Κατά τη διάρκεια του Σαββατοκύριακου γνωρίζουν γυναίκες πρότυπα από διάφορους κλάδους των STEM, οι οποίες έρχονται ως καλεσμένες και μοιράζονται μαζί μας τη δική τους εμπειρία. Δηλαδή, πώς ξεκίνησαν να έχουν ενδιαφέρον για τη βιολογία, για τη χημεία, για τη μηχανική, πόσες αποτυχίες είχαν ή μοιράζονται πολλά έτσι αυθεντικά το δικό τους δρόμο, για να δείξουν στα κορίτσια ότι το τι αποφασίζω σήμερα δεν καθορίζει την επαγγελματική μου πορεία. Πλέον εφήγαμε από το μοντέλο το ότι επιλέγω έναν επάγγελμα και τούτον κάνω για την υπόλοιπη μου ζωή. Επομένως, ρωτούν και ερωτήσεις, εννοείται, έρχονται και σε επαφή. Και παράλληλα, συνδυάζουμε τη συγκεκριμένη συζήτηση με την επιλογή, για την επιλογή επαγγελμάτων και με έναν εργαστήρι που αφορά ξέρω την ελληνική γλώσσα τώρα, συγγνώμη, career counseling. Συγγνώμη, έφυγε μου. Συμβουλευτική, ακριβώς. Ευχαριστώ, Κατερίνα. Λοιπόν, επομένως, εκεί ακριβώς με τους συνεργάτες μας, με τη Μαριόρια Βοσκαρίτου, η οποία είναι σύμβουλος, συζητούν για το mindset το οποίο στην ηλικία εκείνη ξεκινούν να αναπτύσσουν. Το που παρατηρούμε είναι ότι είναι πάρα πολύ κοντά στο τι αποκαλούμε το fixed mindset. Δηλαδή, νομίζουμε ότι τι επιλέγουμε σήμερα καθορίζει, πρέπει να βρω το επάγγελμα που να έχω εγώ για πάντα. Και δεν βλέπουν το επόμενο τους βήμα, ότι είναι μια επιλογή σπουδών. Και πώς ξεκινώ να επιλέγω σπουδές με μια ολιστική προσέγγιση, έχοντας όλες τις πληροφορίες που χρειάζομαι. Επομένως, αυτό είναι ακόμα ένα εργαστήρι που έχουμε ενσωματώσει. Τώρα, για τις πιο μεγάλες, που είχαμε 17-18, ένα διαφορετικό group, προσφέραμε το εργαστήρι επικοινωνικών δεξιοτήτων, πώς ξεκινώ δηλαδή να μιλώ δημόσια, με αφορμή για τη μετάβαση του στο πανεπιστήμιο. Και τα δύο groups που ανέφερα είχαν ενσωματώσει εργαστήρι που αφορούσαν τους 17 βιώσιμους στόχους ανάπτυξης των Ηνωμένων Εθνών. Εκεί συγκεκριμένα συνδέαμε εφευρέσεις που αντιμετωπίζουν αυτές τις παγκόσμιες προκλήσεις με τα STEM, δηλαδή πώς συνδυάζονται έναν επάγγελμα, μηχανικού ή graphic designer ή χημικού με το να λύσω μια παγκόσμια πρόκληση. Και δίνουμε ιδιαίτερη έμφαση και στο στόχο 5 που αφορά τα θέματα ισότητας. Εκεί κάνουμε και κάποιες συζητήσεις που αφορούν σε πιο λεπτομερίες διάφορες προκλήσεις που αντιμετωπίζουν σαν νέες, σχετιζόμενοι πάντα με τα θέματα ισότητας. Επομένως, αυτή έτσι η μεθοδολογία μας για τα προγράμματα STEM. Τα προγράμματα προσφέρονται δωρεάν μεταξύ Σεπτέμβρη με Δεκέμβρη. Τα τελευταία χρόνια έχουμε πάει σε Λεμεσό, Λάρνακα και Λευκοσία. Κάθε χρόνο προσπαθούμε να... επειδή τα προγράμματα, ακριβώς είπαμε, προσφέρονται δωρεάν, βασιζόμαστε σε πόρους που κάνουμε fundraise με ιδιωτικές εταιρείες. Κάθε χρόνο προσπαθούμε να πάμε και σε άλλες πόλεις, να κάνουμε πιο πολλά προγράμματα, να έχουμε όσο πιο πολλές συμμετέχουσες γίνεται. Το που λέμε πάντα είναι ότι τα προγράμματα και η επαφή των αποφύτων μας που ήρθαν στα Μπρίψη δεν τελειώνουν την Κυριακή το απόγευμα. Μια σειρά από δράσεις... πίσω, συγγνώμη. Συνεχίζουμε να προσφέρουμε μια σειρά από προνόμια, αν θέλετε, στις αποφύτες μας, τα οποία αυτά περιλαμβάνουν job shadowing, το πρόγραμμα που προσφέρουμε κάθε καλοκαίρι, δηλαδή παρακολουθούν θέσεις εργασίας στα STEM, οποιασδήποτε άλλες ευκαιρίες ανταλλαγής εμπειριών στο εξωτερικό ή στην Κύπρο, άλλα εκπαιδευτικά προγράμματα που πιστεύουμε ότι μπορούν να υποφεληθούν. Έχουμε μια συνεχή επικοινωνία και επαφή σαν μέρος αυτών των alumni benefits. Συγκεκριμένα, μια δράση είμαστε πάρα πολλά περήφανες και πιστεύουμε ότι είναι πολλά ουσιαστική για τα κορίτσια. Είναι το podcast το οποίο προσφέρουμε. Τους δίνουμε ευκαιρία οι ίδιες να λάβουν τη θέση του ατόμου που παίρνει συνέντευξη από γυναίκες πρότυπα. Σε κάθε επεισόδιο έχουμε μια διαφορετική παρουσιάστρια, μια διαφορετική καλεσμένη. Τα podcast γίνονται σε συνεργασία με την Black Lemon TV, βρίσκονται διαθέσιμα στο YouTube, Spotify. Είναι και μια ευκαιρία οι ίδιες να αναπτύξουν τις επικοινωνιακές τους δεξιότητες. Επομένως, μπορείτε να μας βρείτε και να το ακούσετε, να το προωθήσετε αντίστοιχα το συγκεκριμένο podcast. Συγγνώμη. Έτσι, με μια ματιά ο αντίκτυπος μας, αν θέλετε, μέχρι σήμερα, πέρα από τον αριθμό των αποφύτων που είχαμε στα προγράμματα μας, τον αριθμό των γυναικών που συμμετέχουν στις δράσεις μας, πολύ σημαντικό να εστιάσουμε και στους συνεργάτες μας, στους υποστηριχτές μας, γιατί αν δεν ήταν ήδη η υποστήριξη τους, είτε οικονομική, είτε όχι, τα προγράμματα δεν θα μπορούσαν να γίνουν πραγματικότητα. Φέτος είμαστε ιδιαίτερα περήφανες, γιατί τον αντίκτυπο προσπαθήσαμε να τον μετρήσουμε και με διαφορετικές διαμέτρους, το τι αποκαλούμε το short-term impact. Δηλαδή, μια πολλά λογική και απλή ερώτηση. Έρχονται οι μαθήτριες στα προγράμματά σας, λαμβάνουν όλα αυτά τα προνόμια. Όντως έχουμε κάποιο θετικό αντίκτυπο, επηρεάζουμε τις κάπως. Υπάρχουν δύο διαμέτροι που μπορούμε να το πούμε, να το μετρήσουμε, να το αξιολογήσουμε. Οι απόψεις, μάλλον το short-term αντίκτυπος που υπάρχει μόλις έρθουν στα προγράμματα, μόλις τελειώσουν μάλλον τα προγράμματα, δηλαδή το τι επίστευα πριν, το τι perception είχα για τον εαυτό μου πριν να έρθω στο πρόγραμμα και τι έχω μετά. Και ένα πιο μακροπρόθεσμο αντίκτυπο, ο οποίος αφορά 1 ή 2 χρόνια μετά ή ακόμα πιο συγκεκριμένα οι επιλογές σπουδών τους. Κατά πόσο το Geosystema Academy πιστεύουν ότι επηρεάσε τη συγκεκριμένη απόφαση. Είμαστε στη διαδικασία να κάνουμε τώρα και τις δύο αυτές μετρήσεις. Το short-term impact analysis που είχαμε φέτος έδειξε, για να σταθώ κυρίως στο τελευταίο, το τελικό, ότι 93,3% των συμμετέχουσων που ήρθαν στα προγράμματά μας πιστεύουν ότι είναι πολύ πιο πιθανό να ακολουθήσουν επαγγέλματα STEM μετά, λόγω της συμμετοχής τους μάλλον στο πρόγραμμα μας. Οι πιο τα πιο αναλυτικά αποτελέσματα υπάρχουν στο φετινό μας report αντικτύπου και προόδου. Θα σταθώ ιδιαίτερα σε τούτο, γιατί θέλω να κλείσω με τη συνεργασία μας που έχουμε φέτος με το μουσείο, η οποία μας βοηθάει να επεκτείνουμε το συγκεκριμένο αντίκτυπο πέρα από την ομάδα των κοριτσιών που εμείς τρέχουμε κάθε χρόνο. Επομένως, μισό λεπτό. Ωραία, η συνεργασία μας με το μουσείο, λοιπόν, μας έφερε ο Αλεξανδρός με τη Φωτινή, πρότειναν να δούμε έναν πιθανόν τρόπο να εντάξουμε τη διάσταση του φύλου στο δικό τους curriculum, δράσεις που τρέχει το μουσείο, το οποίο προσφέρει σε διάφορα σχολεία στην Κύπρο. Η συνεργασία μας, λοιπόν, έκαμε ακριβώς αυτόν. Σχεδιάσαμε μαζί μια 3ωρη δράση, την οποία τα σχολεία έχουν τη δυνατότητα να επιλέξουν και οι μαθητές και οι μαθήτριες να δουν. Η συνεργασία μας έδωσε την ευκαιρία σε 20 σχολεία να έχουν δωρεάν τη συγκεκριμένη δράση, όμως προσφέρεται συνεχώς για όλα τα σχολεία. Θέλω να σταθώ λίγο εδώ στο τι επιλέξαμε να κάνουμε, ποια εργαλεία, αν το δούμε έτσι με μια πιο παιδαγωγική μέθοδο, πώς επιλέξαμε να σχεδιάσουμε το συγκεκριμένο πρόγραμμα, το οποίο πιστεύω εκπαιδευτικοί πιθανόν να βρουν ιδιαίτερα ενδιαφέρον. Κάποιες, λοιπόν, από τις δράσεις που περιλαμβάνει αυτό το 3ωρο, υπάρχουν διάφορες υποδράσεις, αλλά οι μεθοδολογίες που επιλέξαμε ήταν, για παράδειγμα, βασίζονται μάλλον σε experiential learning. Θα σταθώ στο ελληνικό, δεν θα το έβρουμε τίποτε. Επομένως, να περιγράψω έτσι ίσως παραπάνω ότι οι μαθητές και οι μαθητρίες μέσα στις 3 ώρες έχουν τη δυνατότητα να πιο βιωματικά να παίξουν, να συζητήσουν για τα συγκεκριμένα θέματα. Και συγκεκριμένα, ας πούμε, έχουμε ένα παράδειγμα όπου οι μαθητές και οι μαθήτριες έχουν ένα task, έχουν να υλοποιήσουν τέλος πάντων μια δράση. Και μετά, όταν θα τους δώσουμε το reward τους, θα τους πληρώσουμε ή θα τους δώσουμε τέλος πάντων μια επιβράβευση, συνειδητά επιλέγεται έναν αγόρι και έναν κορίτσι για τη συγκεκριμένη δράση. Το αγόρι θα πάρει παραπάνω, ξέρω εγώ, το τι να τους δώσουμε σαν δώρον ή επιβράβευση από το κορίτσι. Και έτσι εισαγάγουμε μάλλον το θέμα της άνησης αμοιβής, του χάσματος της αμοιβής, στη συζήτηση. Επομένως, με δράσεις τέτοιου είδους, ξεκινούμε να μιλούμε για τα συγκεκριμένα θέματα, με τους ίδιους να αποτελούν πρωταγωνιστές και πρωταγωνίστες της συζήτησης. Αντίστοιχα, έχουμε ενσωματώσει και μια έτσι επαφή με τις γυναίκες που συνεισφέραν στο συγκεκριμένο τομέα, με τον τρόπο που ήδη το Μουσείο έχει εντάξει το συγκεκριμένο θέμα στις δράσεις του. Κάνουμε πολλές συζητήσεις σε μικρότερα groups, interactive discussion and reflexivity. Συγκεκριμένα, οι ερωτήσεις οι οποίες γίνονται από τον εκπαιδευτικό ή την εκπαιδευτικό είναι open-ended, με την έννοια ότι θέλουμε να αναπτύξουμε και την κριτική σκέψη. Βασιζόμαστε ιδιαίτερα σε έννοιες όπως το κοινωνικό φύλο, τα gender roles. Επομένως, υπάρχει αρκετά ανοιχτή συζήτηση για τα συγκεκριμένα θέματα. Μισό λεπτό να θυμηθώ τώρα, πρόσθετα, εννοείται η διάσταση της προώθησης των γυναικών προτύπων παραμένει στο συγκεκριμένο πρόγραμμα, με case studies και role models, αλλά και real life σενάρια στα οποία έρχονται να κάνουν έτσι λίγο challenge τα πιο παραδοσιακά νόρμες και στερεότυπα. Visual and digital learning, ακόμα μια διάσταση που έχουμε ενσωματώσει. Έχουμε βρει βίντεο και εκπαιδευτικών υλικών, το οποίο να πρέπει να παρακολουθήσουν και μετά να συζητήσουν. Ο Αλέξανδρος και η Φωτινή έχουν εντάξει το programming με micro:bit, αν το λέω σωστά, αλλά και έναν ChatGPT, το είχα πριν, νομίζω, πού είναι, έχασα το. Ίσως ο Αλέξανδρος είναι πιο καταλληλός να πει για το συγκεκριμένο πρόγραμμα που ενσωματώνει την τεχνολογία του ChatGPT για να ρωτήσουν οι μαθητές και οι μαθήτριες ερωτήσεις για τα συγκεκριμένα θέματα. Επομένως, αυτή είναι, έτσι, ας το πούμε τώρα, η νέα μας συνεργασία που χαιρόμαστε ιδιαίτερα, γιατί φτάνουμε και εμείς σε πολύ περισσότερους μαθητές, συγκεκριμένα μαθητές, αλλά και μαθήτριες. Αυτά από εμάς, η ομάδα πίσω από τον System Academy, όπως ανέφερα και πριν, Αναστασία Λιοπετρίτη και εγώ είμαστε οι ιδρύτριες, μαζί με την Ανίτα Tsaliki που υποστηρίζει την υλοποίηση των bridge προγραμμάτων. Αυτές είμαστε μικρή ομάδα. Επομένως, θα χαρούμε, αν μπορώ να λύσω οποιασδήποτε απορίες τώρα, θα χαρώ πολύ, αλλιώς η Αναστασία είναι μαζί σας, για όσους είναι στον χώρο εκεί. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ ξανά για την πρόσκληση και ανυπομονώ να ακούσω τις επόμενες ομιλίες και παρεμβάσεις. Ακούω το χειροκρότημα, τέλεια.
Ευχαριστούμε, Παναγιώτα μου. Να έχουμε και χρόνο στο τέλος, όπου να έχουμε ένα Q&A session, άρα μπορούν να υπάρχουν και ερωτήσεις προς εσένα. Ή σίγουρα η Αναστασία, λέω, αν θέλει κάποιος να ρωτήσει συγκεκριμένα για το πρόγραμμα. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ και για την παρουσίαση σου, αλλά και για την όμορφη δουλειά που κάνετε μέσα από το System Academy. Θα προχωρήσουμε με τον επόμενο μας ομιλητή, που τον γνωρίζετε όλοι, μάλλον για αυτόν τον λόγο είσαστε εδώ. Είναι ο φίλος του Αλεξάνδρος ο Κοφτερός. Όπως όλοι γνωρίζετε, είναι εκπαιδευτικός, είναι δάσκαλος στην πρωτομάθεια, είναι λάτρης της τεχνολογίας, έχει μεγάλο πάθος στην ένταξη τεχνολογιών στην εκπαίδευση. Είναι επίσης συνειδητής του Cyprus Computer Museum και σίγουρα θα στείλει ο ίδιος ότι μετά να πάτε δίπλα να δείτε τα διάφορα εκθέματα που υπάρχουν. Και επίσης, πρόσφατα, το βιβλίο του που έχει να κάνει με τη διδασκαλία και μάθηση μέσω των τεχνητής νοημοσύνης, ένας έτσι πολλά όμορφος οδηγός για το πώς μπορούμε να εντάξουμε τη τεχνητή νοημοσύνη στη διδασκαλία μας με πολλά πρακτικά παραδείγματα. Σήμερα θα μας μιλήσει για το Magnetic Scrolls και την Anita Sinclair, που είναι μία από τις 4 storytellers που θέλουμε να γνωρίσετε. Άρα, Αλέξανδρε,
ευχαριστώ πολύ. Μισό λεπτάκι να κάνω share την οθόνη μου. Παναγιώτα μου, αν μπορείς απλά κλείσει την κάμερα, ώστε να εστιάζουμε πάνω στα υπόλοιπα. Έχουμε το ορίσει έτσι ώστε να μπορεί να γίνεται καλύτερα Εντάξει, μας έτσι να μιλήσω στα αγγλικά. Εντάξει. Okay. I would like to talk speaking in English because this has to do with Anita Sinclair, one of the most important storytellers in video games history. And we're very proud today because we're going to have, usually when we have events where we invite role models, we try to invite people who are very good, exceptional in what we're doing. We're very, very proud today because we don't have just people who are very good. We have the we have Roberta Williams with us. So I'm going to be a bit overwhelmed from that. Okay, I think it's going to pass. I tried to reach out to Anita Sinclair, but unfortunately, one of the co-founders of your company, Anita, said that Anita is not giving interviews. So I did my best on creating an overview of her very important work. Most of the video game revolution started in the United States by accident, actually. And across the pond, they tried and they succeeded in bringing us a lot of technologies. Some of these things are mentioned in the book we presented 2 weeks ago. And actually, all these books are under a Creative Commons license, so you can just download them for free in English and in Greek. And of course, we're moving on with our next 2 books, but that's not it. So I'm going to focus in this presentation on Anita Sinclair and what happened in the UK and the impact. But we have first to, and this is Anita Sinclair. She's very camera shy. She was never in the limelight, so we can never find enough pictures, good quality pictures of Anita Sinclair, even if I go back to my old magazine. So the quality of the images is going to be horrible. The first adventure game, because we're focusing on adventure games, it was created in the PDB-10 system like this that they used in MIT. Now, you're familiar with Asteroids and Pac-Man and these. These are games that are very good and very enjoyable, but these are not for the thinking person, let's say, games, and you can have strategies. But everything started to change with this game. And today you're going to have the opportunity to try the remake of this game on VR, but we're going to talk about that later. Back in the mid-1970s, Will Crowder, he was a programmer at MIT, and he loved to explore caves. So he wanted to pass this hobby to his daughters. So what he did, he created a game, an adventure game, he called it Adventure, where you actually go and explore a cave. So it's a narrative base. The computer gives you the text, the descriptions, and you use very simple 2-word commands to control the narrative. You collect treasure, you meet goals and everything. 2 years later, Don Woods improved the game. They put a scoring system, they added more treasure, they added more challenges to that. And quickly it spread. It spread in such a way that everybody who was using these systems for universities started installing the game as well. And that's how it started. Eventually, I mean, that's the part of it, that's the Don Woods version. Eventually, at least one company broke out of that, and they created an extension of the game that they called Zork 1, Zork 2, Zork 3. And they created Infocom. That was a US-based company, and it's considered one of the best adventure game companies. Now, adventure game games, they are, we lost the screenshot. We fired it again, sorry for that. Adventure games are based on the narrative. So we have the narrative and we work on the text. So they create Zork 1, Zork 2, Zork 3, and 48 other games that are focused on exploration. So they inspired other companies to start creating their own similar games. And of course, we had companies like Level 9, It's a UK company that tried to create similar games. And after Roberta Williams, and we'll talk about that later, she created the first graphic adventure game. All the other companies started following suit. And this is Jewels of Darkness. It's one of the games that was created with very crude graphics, as you can see. And Time and Magic was one of these games, but I'm not going to elaborate on that very much. We can find this online. Actually, we can even find them and play them online because they're abandonware, or they created online versions that we can actually try, even the improved ones. Now, what happened? In the mid-1980s, actually 1984, Sinclair, Clive Sinclair, one of the most prominent computer scientists in UK, he created the first sub-100 counts computer in the world, ZX80, and they created the first one, which was even lower than that. I'm not going to elaborate that. In 1984, he introduced a Sinclair QL. We've got that next one. And Anita Sinclair and another four programmers, they decided that they're going to create their own company for creating interactive adventure games. So initially they wanted to focus only on text, no graphics. But after they demonstrated to them high quality graphics, they decided to add graphics as well. But the game is focused on the story. What they did, their innovation, is that they took a system where you used a very simple two-word commands: go south, pickaxe, open door, and they created a very complex engine where we could output complete sentences. Now, the funny thing is that a lot of students and people ask me, how are you so fast in typing? Because I was playing adventure games. I was growing up. So that's about it. The Pawn is one of the most amazing adventure games ever created. The Guild of Thieves also, you're actually trying to get into the Guild of Thieves. That was the actual game. And of course, that's part of the game. When we saw these graphics in the mid to late 80s on the Atari ST and the Commodore Amiga, I mean, nowadays, you got this graphic and say, what's that? Back then, the first thing was, wow, it was incredible graphics. And amazing description. And of course, a system where you don't just click paste, but you write complete sentences. There was a puzzle where you had to enter, I think, the stable. And there were so many flies there, and you just couldn't get into the stable. So at another location, you found a jar of jam. So what you did is that you took the jar of jam from one, and you had to think that, hey, flies, they like jam. So you go to the stable, and imagine, this is text-based, right? There are no graphics there. The graphics are there just every 5 or 10 locations. You just have one image, so it's not that you see the picture. You read the text, you read the description. So you use commands to go to the stable, and then you type, open the jar. Once you open the jar, the game responds by saying all the flies went into the jar trying to eat the jam, and now they're all stuck in there. So you just solved one puzzle. All right. It was full puzzle. You had to think. And back then, back in the late 1980s, we didn't have we couldn't just go online and find the solution. We had to really press our minds and think about that. And not everyone had a computer, so we're spending hours and days until we managed to figure out how to solve the puzzle. And that was the thing with it. Now, this is Anita Sinclair on the left. And they didn't focus only on text or on fantasy games. They also created games that are more closer to real life. For example, Corruption. This is about a stockbroker who was wrongly accused for inside dealing. So I was in secondary school, and I had to learn what inside dealing is, what a stockbroker is, and it's quite amazing. So you have to really early on in the game, you are accused of inside
trading, your partner is backstabbing you, the police are chasing after you. So you have to figure out what's going on, and you have to solve that, unless you, otherwise you're going into jail. So it was very, very important game. That was at the height of the adventure games. And this is just part of it. You see there is the text and description, and you just say, unfortunately, I don't know what's happening. Figure it out. So the graphics in the game, they're there every few screens. They are, of course, related to what you're doing, but you are completely focused on the story. So it's story-driven. You have to read text, you have to respond honestly, you have to solve puzzles. And of course, in the late 80s, early 90s, all the computers were moving from the so-called 80s to computers that supported the mouse and a graphic user interface. So all the companies started adapting. And Magnetic Window and Magnetic Scrolls, as was their name, they changed the name to Magnetic Windows to best resemble the new industry and where everything was going. So they created Wonderland based on the famous book. And that was their first game using very good backstory. But they added some icons for control and more graphics to that. Unfortunately, in the mid-90s, there was a heavy decline in the text-based adventure games. And unfortunately, because Magnetic Scrolls, even though they adapted some kind of click and play, they were still a text-based adventure game company. So even though they had high-quality games, they went under with the rest of the companies. And the companies that persisted in the market were companies like Sierra Online and Lucasfilm Games, where they were moving into animated adventure games and 3D games, like we'll see later on. So that was the legacy of Magnetic Scrolls, and it was a really amazing company. Now, what happened is that unfortunately they fell victim to the changes of time. They refused to change their model of working. They were a text-based company. That was it. They were heavily focused on that. They refused to do something else because that's what they wanted to do. Eventually, the company was sold to another company, and they stopped working on the computer. However, one of the co-founders of the company that we exchanged some emails, and I asked him whether he wanted to participate today and say a few things about Annita because she worked with me. He said that they are doing some remasters of their old games. And they're even trying, there was a very peculiar game called Fish, where you assume the role of a fish. It was amazing. And they're doing a Fish 2. Has anyone here played Fish? No? Okay, they're doing a Fish 2. Right, and they're going to release that. Now, the contribution of Anita Sinclair, even though she was not strictly a storyteller, she was a programmer, a very charismatic programmer. She was the lone woman programmer in a company with male partners. However, she was the head of the company. She was the company. I remember reading everything about Anita Sinclair back in the late 1980s, and Magnetic Scrolls was always Anita Sinclair. Not because she was the face of that, not because they wanted to put a pretty face on that, but because Anita Sinclair was the leading force behind the company. She was the one who insisted on the quality game. She was the one insisting on creating great adventure games, great narrative for the games. And that's what she gave us. She gave us interactive storytelling in a way that still their stories are unsurpassed. So just a hint, if you ever play the phone, which is the first game, is amazing. At some point you will visit hell. You want to get unstuck. The only way to do that is that ask the devil about life. He's gonna kick you out. So that's about it. That's about it about Anita Sinclair, the other side of the phone. Just before I conclude this, We're going to have a special event. I have no idea when that's going to be, with the High Commission of Britain and IET Local Network. And we're going to focus on the contribution of Britain in computers. And one of the things that we can say about Britain is that all the mobile devices we use today are based on the processor that they created yesterday. And I don't know. All right, thank you for coming here. All right, that's it about. Stop sharing. All right.
Ευχαριστούμε, Αλέξανδρε μου. Άρα θα ξεκινήσεις τα αγγλικά, να συνεχίσουμε αγγλικά. Πήγαμε στο section μας των αγγλικών. Έτσι, από την Anita Sinclair, που ήταν από τις πρώτες γυναίκες που είχαμε σε storytelling σε video games, θα πάμε σε ένα μοντέρνο version of game developers. Έχουμε δύο game developers εδώ, την Έλενα Κασκύρη και την Βίκη Σιμεωνίδου. Η Βίκη είναι online. They are both secret game developers and co-founders of Lilith's Child's Game Studio, an independent game development studio based in Cyprus. That began as a hobby, their collaboration, but they've established their own company and they've actually developed several games, including The Light Will Lead You Home, which is a survival horror game where the player must escape a monster using light. They've also developed Bring Her Back, an adventure game with horror elements. And they've also participated in various events like Cyprus Computer. They've showcased their work in the gaming community, and they've also collaborated with different organizations, including our organization, Center for Social Innovation, for developing various games. So Elena and Vicky are going to talk to us today about creating adventure games in Cyprus and how they have to develop their studio. Right?
Sorry, απλά να κάνουμε share για τον κόσμο που βλέπει online. Ναι, κάνουμε τώρα. Ωραία, μια χαρά.
Okay. Crafting Stories in Interactive Worlds by Lilith's Child Game Studio. Hello all, we are Elena Kaskiri and Tsaliki Simeonidou. We are co-founders and game developers in our studio. And we have strong social media presence and we like to engage and interact with our audience. We participated in many events and programs which helped us gain valuable awards, connections, and knowledge. We already released 2 games and we have more demos and prototypes that are on their way to be fully developed. Our first ever released video game got 2nd place on Best Great Video Game of the Year 2021. So today, we are celebrating International Women's Day, paying tribute to the remarkable achievements of women worldwide and calling for gender equality. We do this in our free time. We create story-driven puzzle video games, and our dream is to bring as many of our ideas, thoughts, reflection, and nightmares to life, so people can relate and feel some satisfaction playing them. We are participating, and we are members of IET Cyprus, and we are Women in Games ambassadors, two organizations that empower, motivate, and connect women. So how it all started, and about our name and our logo. Lilith's child derives from the Jewish myth, the myth that says Lilith was the first woman, and it was cursed by God not to have children. So we decided to name our studio Lilith's Child to represent something miraculous, because there are so many talented people and great games out there that it will take a miracle to stand out. Our logo represents our group collaboration, and that it's equally important to us to use our mind and passion to create our games. Here you can see our video games. The first two are fully released. The Light Will Lead You Home and Bring Her Back. The Light Will Lead You Home is about 1 hour gameplay, and it's a horror puzzle video game. And the Bring Her Back, it's around 15 minutes gameplay, and it's a horror platformer. And the other two, we have demos for them. My Faceless Crew is a sci-fi horror, and the Macverse, the Little House, is fantasy puzzle. Private Witch Eye, The Case of our Root, is our new game, and we have a playable prototype that you can play anytime and give us feedback. And it's estimated to be released by the end of 2026.
So, hello from me as well. So sorry for not being able to be there with you, but unfortunately COVID had other plans for me. So I will tell you a little about storytelling types and techniques and give you some examples from our games. So first of all, storytelling types. The first one is linear storytelling, which is the most popular one, I think. So basically the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The story takes place in a straightforward and chronological order. We also have branching storytelling. That means that the player's choices influence the story's progressions. Maybe there are different paths to take in the story, maybe have multiple endings, etc. Another type is emergent or procedural storytelling. The player's interactions with the game systems or AI or other players affect the story in a way that the developers did not code into the game. We also have episodic storytelling. So just like TV series, the game story is break down into chapters or episodes. Another one is open world storytelling. So the story of the game takes place in an open world environment where the players can explore and discover things at their own pace. Storytelling techniques. So we have environmental storytelling. So for example, abandoned buildings or graffiti to tell a story or part of the story, or maybe the player needs to find objects to progress in the story or symbolism, etc. We also have dialogue, gameplay integration, which means the player's moral choices might affect the story, or the players need to solve some puzzles to progress with the story, etc. Another one is player agency, which means players' choices affect the story. Player's perspective, which is, for example, first person or third person. And finally, cutscenes. So let me tell you first a little bit about our games so you know about the examples that I will give later. So first of all, The Light Will Lead You Home. It's our first game, as Elena said, it's a horror survival game. And you play as Brian, a teenage boy who wakes up locked in his house with a monster that its only weakness is light. So the story of this game is linear. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. No matter what the player does, the story ends the same way. Our second game is Bring Her Back. It's a horror survival game as well, but this time the storyline is branching. That means that the player's choice affects the game. So in this game, we have two endings based on the player's choice. In this game, you take the role of someone whose wife died and you need to bring her back from the dead. Our latest game is Private Witch-Eye, The Case of Our Roots. It's currently in progress and the story is already written down and it's linear. So, first of all, environment. Players will have to unravel the story by exploring the environment. That means that the players might have to find objects or clues in order to learn about the story or progress through the story. We might find letters or newspaper clips that might have clues or story on it. Maybe a photograph here or there that maybe the main character is photographed with his family, with his or her family to show the background story of the main character. And here, for example, on the right image, we have a letter that the players can find in our game, The Light Will Lead You Home. The Light Will Lead You Home. And basically, through this letter, we let the players know where they can find an object that they need to find to progress with the story, and also give some background and information on the main character's family. Environment is also important in the matter of how to give the correct atmosphere or the correct vibe for the story. So level design or props or even art style is very important for the story. So here is, for example, we have two images, A and B. Which one of these images do you think makes more sense as an environment for a horror story, A or B? Well, A, obviously. So A is from our game, The Light Will Lead You Home, which is a horror story, and B is from our game, Private Witch-Eye, which has a more fantasy setting. Symbolism is also very important. For example, on the left image where we can see some flowers, it's from our game Bring Her Back, which has a main theme of death. So in the starting scene, the player comes across some poppies, which is a universal symbol for death. Another technique is dialogue, which we all are familiar with. So dialogue can have many forms. For example, dialogue between two or more characters, which will progress the story or tell the player where they need to go, or maybe inform the player about some past experience of the main character or past events. We also have messages between characters. In the right image is a message system that we developed in our game Private Witch-Eye, and the main character, Mona, can interact with NPCs like her mom or her friend Louise. And through those messages, we give some background information on the main character's story and abilities. We can also have monologue. So for example, the main character might give some hint about the story or hint to the player where do they need to go next, that the player might not have another way of finding out. For example, in The Light Will Lead You Home, when the players will have to escape from the house, they try to go out from the front door. But when they interact with the door, the main character, through internal monologue, informs the player that the door is locked and the key might be in the kitchen. Very important is player's perspective, of course. We can have first person or third person or top down. We usually use first person, and that means that the players see and act from the main character's point of view. That also makes the players more invested in the story. We also have player agency, which, as we have already said, the player's choice influences the story's progressions. So we might have some different paths in the story, or maybe gets multiple endings, etc. This is also good for replayability. So the players can go back and replay the game in order to get a different ending or take a different path, see what other choices they could make. And here we can see the two different endings that we can get in Bring Her Back, which is either good or bad, depending on the player's choices. And finally, we have cutscenes that, just like a movie, we use cutscenes to tell a story. So here we have a cutscene from our game, The Light Will Lead You Home, which is the ending cutscene, and wraps up the story and informs the player about what really happened to the main character. I cut the cutscene in the middle so that you don't see all the spoilers. That's about it, about techniques of storytelling.
So now about our latest game and some exclusive news. The Private Witch-Eye, The Case of Our Roots, will be renamed to Private Witch-Eye, The Lotus Killer, because we love our symbolism. And in our game, you play as Mona, a modern-day witch who has the ability to enter crime scenes through photographs. And she uses her abilities to help the police solve supernatural cases. But what happens when one day a case becomes personal and the murderer gets too close? So some specs about our game: it will be single player, and the genre is adventure, narrative, puzzle, inspection, and it will be released for PC through Steam. We currently have a playable prototype, and we estimate it to be released by the end of 2026. And the gameplay time will be 4 to 5 hours long. You can scan our QR code to learn more about us, to find our games and our social media. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Vicky. We're going to continue with our program in English. So now is the time that everyone has been waiting for, where we're going to meet our two renowned storytellers, the two of the four that we're actually celebrating tonight as we celebrate Women's Day tomorrow. So first we have Miss Lori-Ann Cole. She's a renowned game designer, writer, and director, best known for her work on the Quest for Glory series, which blended role-playing mechanics with adventure game storytelling. She co-founded Legend Entertainment, which was later renamed to Transfer Games, with her husband, Corey Cole, and has been a key figure in the development of narrative-driven games. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Lori and Corey Cole worked at Sierra Online, where they created Quest for Glory, a groundbreaking game that combined point-and-click adventure gameplay with RPG elements like character classes, skills, and combat. The fusion of genres made the series unique and beloved among fans. Lori also designed Shannara based on Terry Brooks' fantasy novels, and later developed Hero U, Road to Redemption, a spiritual successor to Quest for Glory, bringing her signature blend of humor, storytelling, and role-playing mechanics to a new generation of players. She has inspired a lot of developers to merge genres and craft rich interactive worlds, and she has left a lasting impact on adventure and RPG gaming. So we're very honored to have with us tonight Ms. Cole. Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us.
Mrs. Cole, we can't hear you.
Hi, Mr. Cole.
We still cannot hear you. We can see you, but we cannot hear you.
Okay, we can hear you.
Working?
Yeah.
No, have to adjust it there.
Thank you. It's great to see you again.
There. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, of course.
Okay, our speaker microphone decided not to work, of course.
Yes, of course. That's what the. So I prepared just some slides to go along with our discussion. So the first question, so you want to be a hero?
Well, I think everyone wants to be a hero. I think that was what made our game so meaningful to people, is that I think everybody wants to be a hero on some level. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to change things. And so I think from that theme, we basically, keep making games, reminding people that it doesn't take much to become a hero, just constant action and the willingness to do things.
Yes. The thing is that what first struck me when I played the first game in the series, personally, because I'm a huge fan of it, I have to admit that, was exactly the title. So you want to be a hero. It wasn't quite a question. It wasn't asking you a question. It was saying you. It was telling you that you want to be a hero. We lost your sound again for some reason.
Well,
yes,
there. Yes. We want people to feel like they're heroic in these games. So they're very much all about the player doing these things in this world.
Yes. And now, what we have here on screen, I have to explain to the audience because they're a bit younger than me. This is the first game. This is the first game they created. It was an animated graphic adventure game, groundbreaking animated graphic adventure game. And on the left, we've got the original cover, but they had to change that to Quest for Glory. But okay, we like it. And that's the iconic name that stuck with the game itself.
Hero's Quest was originally the type of game that you had to type in all commands, and basically you could have simple commands like go there or, ask about something to another character. And the Quest for Glory, when we changed the name, we also changed the entire way to play the game. We went to point and click so that you didn't have to have a keyboard attached to your computer to be able to do it. And you could have an easier time playing the game.
Yes, can I ask you here, what was the aspiration behind going for Quest for Glory?
Well, I came from a Dungeons and Dragons game playing perspective. I wanted to give players the chance to experience that drama and that excitement of actually being part of a game and part of a world, and feeling like this is an adventure that they're actually having an effect on and making the story.
And if I may here, one of the first groundbreaking things you did with this game was, for the first time, we could actually select a player, whether it was a fighter, a magic user, or a thief. So we had a game that you actually selected the style you wanted to play. And this introduced, if I'm correct, the first role-playing adventure game. I mean, that was the first of its kind.
Yes, it was. Because I came from the game style of letting the player make the choices and actually be the one to be telling the story. So we gave the player as much feeling like they were in control of what was going to happen. It meant that I told the story from 3 different approaches in this point, so that you had to have the game stayed the same, but how you went about solving problems or helping people was totally different, whether you were a fighter, a magic user, or a thief. And not only did it give the player this feeling that they were in control and they had meaningful choices, but then they could replay the game again as a different character and re-experience the whole thing from another perspective.
That was, I remember playing the original game and how amazed I was because of the change. But that really skyrocketed the complexity of the game, because you have to have 3 different narratives and at the same time be in the same place doing quite similar things. How was that? How did you manage that complexity?
I'm very good at handling it from one perspective of how to think about these things, but it's very complicated for programming. It's complicated for art. It just, it tripled the amount of effort that everybody had to put into it. But then I think it was very rewarding and the players really enjoyed it, so it was worth all that effort.
Well, I can tell you that from my point of view, I really did enjoy the game. And even though we had something similar in King's Quest VI, the progression from day to night, you had progression from day to night, where in the night you do different things. For example, if you're the thief and you want to rob a house, you have to wait until the night. So how did you handle? I mean, this is also a complexity. How did you handle that?
Well, with the design was handled, first of all, like all movies and things, we have the story laid out of where the key points are and what's the highlight and what's the conclusion. And then basically we handled it room by room. What can go on in that room, when in the game it goes on, what happens in that room after you've done something. And so it's always like each room is a little miniature stage of events that can happen in the game. And so I really thought of it as where you are and what are you doing at this particular time in the game. So all of my games were extremely branching and having conditions of, well, if you've already talked to this person and you try to talk to them again, well, what do they say now? Because what I was trying to do was give the player this feeling that this is a real world, that these aren't just little computer characters standing in front of you. They're real people with backstories, with their own tale to tell, and you get a chance to learn more about them and to find out what their stories are, or to affect the world around you, bits by bit of, like solving a mystery.
How did when you broke new ground with this game, because we introduced an advancement system, you progress and then the player became better, more equipped, stronger, but you also had action sequences. That was quite groundbreaking for Sierra at the time. How did you go with that?
The reason we had combat and dangerous situations was because I really feel like you're more invested in the game if you feel like this is a real meaningful experience. And combat puts you at a height of interest into the game. You have something on the line. It isn't all just an intellectual game. It's really experience that you are going through. And we tried to make it fair so that the player could avoid this if they didn't want to do this combat. But when they did the combat, they got this another aspect of gameplay that they could really enjoy.
And this is something that really preceded other games that are considered action RPGs, at least Western ones, because obviously we've got the Japanese role-playing games, which are completely different. Regarding the first game, you were mostly based on Western myths. I remember the Baba Yaga, if I pronounced that correctly. Well, that was an amazing thing. But for Quest for Glory 2, you went for something quite different. Now, what we see here is a screenshot from Quest for Glory 1 with the scoring system and some of the characters. And this is a VGA. This is a VGA screenshot. I played that on my Atari ST, actually. Yeah, it didn't look half that nice, but it was still a very enjoyable game. So for the next installment, you went to Arabian Nights inspired. Why did you choose such a different way of telling the story? You went to something entirely different.
Well, we always proposed this game as a series. We wanted to take the player on this grand, adventure all across, well, in this case, Europe and that, to give them a totally new experience. But we started out in a Germanic kind of setting, like the traditional fairy tales that most people were familiar with, of the worlds that they would be comfortable with because they had played it in the King's Quest kind of games and that, so that they felt like, okay, I know what this setting is like. I know what kinds of things happen. So that gave the player, some expectations and ability to manage what was going on. Then we take that same character that you're playing there, that little character that's walking around, we take them to a totally different environment, a totally different culture. And now you have to learn how to deal with the situation while you're in a different land, you're in a different storytelling setting, and the mythology behind it is all Arabian Nights and the Persian mythos, and the player gets to learn all these different things as they experience the game.
That was quite fantastic for its time, and it's still one of my favorite games, I must say. And in Cyprus, especially as in Cyprus, we're much closer to the Middle East myths. So we grew up actually with these fairy tales. So it's something that we could better associate ourselves with. I mean, these are fairy tales that our parents used to tell us. And the blending and the change of the setting and the improvement of the story, I mean, this was fantastic. And while I say that, Quest for Glory was one of the best commercial hits that Sierra had, right?
Well, it was very high. It was one of the highest at the time when it came out. But Sierra got a lot of hits over the years.
That's true, but you told me a very important story last time about Quest for Glory that it almost never made it out of the door.
Oh, yes. Well, the people that ran Sierra did not actually play the games. They didn't, they didn't know what we were creating. And you can't tell when you're making a game, you get all these bits and pieces that are all separate. You got this little character moving around the screen. You've got these story that nobody can read about until it's actually in the game. And until you put the music and the story and the characters all together, you can't see it. You can't see the vision. You don't know what it is. And, people can't tell until it's done whether it will be a success or not.
Well, I'm very glad that it did manage to go out because it's still one of the best, most acclaimed series of games, and it really broke a lot of grounds. Actually, a lot of the games that came out of the series, they did that. But Quest for Glory redefined a lot of genres, especially the action RPG games. And every other type of game I played from other studios, I was always comparing the action, the leveling system with what came before in the Quest for Glory. And yeah, that was an incredible game. And the thing is that you see these developers which were still, I consider, some of the best developers out there, and storytellers, because Mrs. Cole was not just a developer. Mrs. Cole, a highly acclaimed developer and storyteller, and one of the best storytellers out there. And I'm quite sure you inspired thousands of people to get involved in storytelling. And one of the things that I really like is that you're still you're still active with that. I mean, you're still creating games. And of course, there was an evolution of the Quest for Glory up until Quest for Glory 5, and that was the last one I bought on CD-ROM with a more, let's say, 2D. Can I ask something about that? I mean, the Quest for Glory, the first game, you had the limitations of the floppiness. But for Quest for Glory 5, you had the CD-ROM, which was huge amount of data you could cram in there. What can you say about, I mean, did it help you unleash your imagination that you had 650 megabytes available?
Well, the difference between doing it originally with that old system and the limitations of the system versus the Quest for Glory 5, now we're in a three-dimensional world, is that everything takes, 10 times as long to create. All of these elaborate 3D worlds are just an incredible amount of time and effort, even more so than the original game. And it's not like we didn't cram that CD full of everything we possibly could, because, we had the 3D art, we had great music, the sound in that thing was much better. We had some voices and voice acting. It's like we've suddenly gone to the level of what a reality, to create that reality of the game for the player.
And of course, after that, you went to create some more games. And now we have Hero U. We can safely assume that this is a spiritual successor to Quest for Glory, right?
Yes. The Quest for Glory games, you chose who your character was. And because I wanted the player to feel like they are the one that is that character moving around the screen. However, games like Monkey Island showed to me that, sometimes it's fun to play a character who is walking around the screen and doing things from the character's perspective. So therefore, this game is all about this young wannabe thief who learns in the course of the game how to become a hero. And it still has the player making all these choices. And maybe in the end, the player chooses he doesn't want to be a hero. And that's his choice. He can play that way. And he gets the consequences of what happens if he chooses that. So once again, even though it's somebody else's character, it's Sean O'Connor you're playing on the screen, it's still very much your game. And you are the one that's telling the game.
We've got Hero U, so after we finish with the Q&A, everyone is more than welcome to try it. So we got Hero Q, we got Quest for Glory on our older systems that you can try them out. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is that, will we see sequels to Hero U, or did you develop them with having just one of in your mind?
Well, we originally developed it with the idea that we would do, much like Quest for Glory, we would have a sequence. So this would be the first game in the sequence of Hero U. We'd have the next game would be Wizard Way, where you would play a young, mysterious woman who is hiding who her real identity is as you play the game, who and is the heir to a kingdom in Italy. It's that sort of thing. We have a whole sequence, but we don't have a whole lot of money. It would take millions of dollars to put on this, to create this, and we didn't actually make the $1 million yet. So for now, we are doing small adventure novels games right now, and maybe someday I'll get to finish that series.
Well, we would be very delighted to see the sequels to this game. To be quite honest, I haven't been very much involved in this game, but I'm waiting for the Easter holidays we have here in end of April, so I'm going to devote some more time on that. And it's going to be real joy. Mrs. Cole, I would like to thank you. First of all, I have to mention that Mrs. Lori Cole and her husband, Mr. Corey Cole, he's a highly accomplished programmer, and they are dynamic duo together. I mean, they're two powerful people. And Mr. Corey said today, okay, I'm going to stay out of the limelight because it's a storytelling event. But he will be with us during the Q&A answer session to give us his lights on coding. So thank you, Mrs. Lori. And we'll see you in about half an hour for the Q&A. I'm quite sure that a lot of people here wanted to ask a question. I've got some questions, but I leave it for the Q&A session.
Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.
Much. Σταύρη μου, αν μπορούμε να αφήσουμε τις ερωτήσεις για το τέλος. Λοιπόν, επόμενη είναι η Roberta. Okay. Λοιπόν, ακόμα είναι η Roberta. Θα δώσουμε θέσεις όταν περιμένουμε να μπει. Έχεις δίκιο. Ναι. Λοιπόν, χθες έκαναμε δοκιμαστική σύνδεση. Ρωτάμε, μια καταπληκτική, πώς ήταν και η Λόριαν, πάρα πολλά απλή, και η Ρομπέρτα Williams το ίδιο. Αλλά το ίδιο, πριν 2 εβδομάδες, είχαμε weeks ago, we had the book's presentation. So we had with us RJ Mical, the creator of the Amiga, probably the most significant Amiga ever created. We had David Fox from Lucasfilm Games. We had Francois Lionet. We had Robert Holmes. And these are huge names. But they have one thing in common. They are very humble. They are, and you see, I mean, you saw that with Lorian. She was putting it as like we are her peers. And the same with Roberta. So yesterday she said, so how are you going to do it tomorrow? I said, well, for the first 5 minutes I'm going to try. And then we'll get on with it. I hope she manages to connect in the next few minutes. Originally, we were planning on having 4 we couldn't find Anita Sinclair. She's not giving any interview, so we had to respect that. And we're going to mention Jensen, which is highly acclaimed storyteller. She's the creator of the Gabriel Knight series of games for Sierra. We had Robert Holmes, the husband, which is the music composer. In our last event. we couldn't have Ms. Jensen today, and because we're going to have a special event on horror games that include games like Gabriel Knight, we left that out for later. So not going to, and hopefully we can have Ms. Jensen for the next event. Otherwise, we'll dedicate that to her. Okay, I'll just see if there's anything else in here. Just give me a second to check my email. There's anything.
Αλεξάνδρε μου, νομίζω είναι μέσα. Εγώ την βλέπω.
Η Ρομπέρτα.
Ναι.
Ένα λεπτάκι. Να απαντήσουν και ο Hugh. Λοιπόν, wait a minute. Yes. Roberta Williams. Yes. Oh my God. Mrs. Williams, sorry. Mrs. Williams. Yes, Mrs. Williams. Sorry for that. I was looking at the. Yes. Okay. Oh, wow.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
I have to fix my camera.
All right.
Sorry about that. I couldn't see myself yet to place my camera. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ms. Williams. Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate pioneering women in storytelling in video games. So we're celebrating for women tonight, and you're one of those. Thank you so much for your contribution in storytelling in video games. I'm just going to give a brief bio so that everyone here gets to hear more about your background. So Ms. Williams is a pioneering game designer and one of the most influential figures in the history of video games. She co-founded Sierra Online with her husband, Ken Williams, playing a crucial role in shaping the graphic adventure game genre. Her most notable work includes the King's Quest series, which revolutionized adventure gaming by introducing a graphical interface and a more interactive storytelling approach. Other significant titles she designed include Mystery House, The Colonel's Bequest, Phantasmagoria, and Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. She was one of the first game designers to emphasize story and character development in video games, making them more immersive and cinematic. And after stepping away from the industry in the late 1990s, she and her husband returned with Cyprus Entertainment, developing Colossal Cave 3D Adventure, a modern reimagining of the classical textual adventure. We're really happy to have you tonight with us, and I'm going to pass it on to Alexandros, who's going to have an interactive session with you discussing on the greatest stories ever told.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes crying, and then we can continue the interview.
Okay.
So,
yes.
The Perils of Roberta. The fourth installment of King's Quest was called The Perils of Rosella, so I just changed that to that.
Mhm.
And to commemorate the day, we're going to have cookies here. We're going to serve everyone with that famous cabinet. Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Sorry, I just lost the screen. Just let me share that again.
Oh, okay.
Apologies for that. It's not helping me a bit. Now, the story starts with the adventure game, right?
Yes.
And that was what really kickstarted your interest in adventure games and led you to create the first graphic adventure game. You created this genre.
Sorry about that. That's my dog with her ball.
No worries.
I don't know if you heard that.
Usually my cats participate in the. May I ask here? obviously, we had Infocom creating their own Zolt games, which were heavily text-based.
Uh-huh.
It inspired you to go to all this trouble and get all the technical stuff. Of course, Mr. Williams is a brilliant programmer.
Yes.
Why did you go into all this fuss about that?
You mean like adding graphics and that
Yes.
instead of just staying with the text?
Yes.
Well, when I originally designed Mystery House, which was after I had played some, there were very, very few adventure games to play at the time. This was in early 1980. And so there was Colossal Cave, also called Original Adventure. That was, it was being sold at the time by Microsoft under Microsoft Adventure, and also Apple. Apple sold it also under Apple's Adventure. And that was just the initial, very, very first texted or adventure game of all, was that game. And I played that, and that's what really got me into adventure gaming or any kind of computer gaming at all. And then I played some games from Adventure International, which was by Scott Adams. He was next up to design text adventure games after he was also inspired by Colossal Cave or Original Adventure. And I played some of his games, and then that was it. There was no more. So if somebody wanted to continue to play these kind of games, they had to do it themselves, I guess. So that's what I did. And I sat down at the kitchen table and just started designing. I put together the idea of the board game Clue, which I really always loved as a child to play that. And also the famous writer Agatha Christie, some of her books like, you know, 10 Little Indians, or was it Death on the Nile, or whatever that was called. But that kind of thing, put them together, kind of that same idea of a murder mystery, but with a board game. You know, that's Clue is what gave me the idea of how to try to put together a story and a game at the same time. So I originally designed Mystery House as a text game. I didn't know that we would be able to do graphics, but when I was talking to Ken, that's my husband, about it, who's a world-class programmer. He still is. He still loves it. But I talked to him about my game, and I wanted him to program it for me. I do know some programming. I have some experience with that, but nothing to be able to do a game, you know, like this. And I asked him to program it for me. And as we were talking about it, he said, you know, we could try to put graphics to it. And I said, you know, I was like, really? Because I really had thought about it in my mind, but didn't think that we would be able to do it. And when he mentioned it, I knew if anybody could do it and figure it out, he could. And he did. And so that's really how and why we got into the graphic aspect of computer gaming.
And thank God for that, because that's where you started creating other games that are also heavy on graphics. Now, this might seem like a crude graphic today.
Very crude, yes.
But back then, it was revolutionary, considering what we had in terms of hardware. And of course, then you had the high-res graphics adventure games, and some of the milestones that people, they don't consider them. I mean, Mission Asteroid, it was a groundbreaking story about an asteroid coming to strike the Earth, and you have to somehow destroy that. And this game preceded in Armageddon movies by decades, and also The Dig, one of the most famous adventure games by Lucasfilm, which also happened to change the producers before they brought it out.
Yeah, I think I was probably one of the first people to have this story idea. I mean, I don't want to say for sure, you know, because I know I'll get text or whatever, saying, oh no, there was this other, one. But yeah, I think I was one of the first to have the idea of if an asteroid was going to come and hit the Earth, that if we could somehow fly a rocket and land on an asteroid, which has happened since, I think, in the last year or two or three. I think, and I don't know if it was Japan or maybe it was China. I'm pretty sure that we humans did land a rocket on an asteroid and actually took some soil samples and was able to bring it back, I think, but don't hold me to it. But the idea of taking a rocket with an astronaut inside of the rocket and land it on an asteroid and in this case, it was a big bomb that you would set off with a timer, and then you have to hurry and get back in your rocket and get away from the asteroid, and then it would blow it up, not so much blow it up, but deviate the course that it would take. And if you played the game right, you saved the world.
That's what we really want to have. I mean, and you originally started selling them in Ziploc bags, the first case, right?
Which one?
In zip bags, the first case, just bags, put this, and then you send them to the stores, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. When the very first game was, as I said, Mystery House, and it was just Ken and I. He programmed it, and I did the art. And now I have to say a little something. The art is really bad, and I'm not a great artist. I will admit that. But the one reason why it was not the best art in the world is because there was no way of getting graphics into a computer game at the time. That nobody had figured out how to do that, and we went around to, there were only a very few, we lived in the Los Angeles area of California, and there were only about 4 computer stores in all of the county of Los Angeles. And we went to those 4 computer stores to see if there's some way or some new gadget or something that we could use to be able to get graphics into an Apple computer. Because Mystery House was, it came out on the Apple II. And as it turned out, there was something called a graphics tablet in one of the computer stores, and Ken picked it up and said, what is this? It was like an acrylic flat tablet, like 8.5 by 11 size, like a piece of paper about that size. And it had a little articulated arm on it, kind of like this, and it had like a little magnetic point here or something that a computer could read it. So as you moved your articulated arm over this tablet with the magnetic thing, it could talk to the computer and draw. So if I put a piece of paper on the tablet and I drew on it, I drew something very simple with just pencil and taped it to this tablet, then the articulated arm, I could follow my lines, and that would create the graphics that would go into the Apple II computer, but there was no software for it. So there was the tablet, there was the articulated arm, there was the magnetic little point, but there was no software at all for it to communicate with the computer. And Ken wrote that. He figured out how to write that and have that tablet talk to our computer. And once he figured that out, then it was just up to me to just draw a bunch of pictures, for each room on a piece of paper, tape it, and then try to follow the lines. But that articulated arm didn't work really well, and it wouldn't always stay on the lines, and it was just really tricky to do. So when people see the art and they kind of go, "Whoa, you know, you're not that great of an artist." Well, you know, to try to it was very difficult to use that thing, but at least we got the pictures in. I think there were like 80 pictures or something like that, but we did it.
Yes, and you wrote history because that was the first graphic adventure game.
Graphic computer game.
Yes.
There were no, at that time, there were no other computer games at all that had graphics. Now, it didn't take long after we released Mystery House for I think the game that came out by I'm drawing a blank. I shouldn't draw a blank on who he would. The name of the game was Calibeth by
Infocom, Level 9.
no. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. If anybody looks up the game Calibeth, then you'll see who it, you know, and I'm going to go, oh my God, how could you forget? Yeah, it was a game that came out a couple of months after Mystery House that also had really bad pictures, like we had on Mystery House, but it was the second game to have graphics.
Yeah, Calibeth, Lord British, Richard Garriott.
Who?
By Richard Garriott, Calibeth.
Yes, Richard Garriott. That's right.
Thank you.
That's right.
But in 1983, IBM came knocking on your door, and they wanted you to create their game. Thank God for that.
Yes. Well, that was this. I think it was the second game I ever did, or I always forget whether Mission Asteroid was the second game I did, or Wizard and the Princess. I think it was Wizard and the Princess, and then I did Mission Asteroid. But anyway, Wizard and the Princess was I'm going to say a second game that I ever did, which was based upon myths and legends and fairy tales. Because as a little girl, I loved fairy tales, myths, Greek myths a lot too, and you know, any kind of thing that has even an adventure flair or fantasy. So I put together just a series of fairy tales for Wizard and the Princess. The whole idea being you, and there was no avatar. There was no third little character you're guiding around. It was just first-person perspective. But you were to rescue a princess out of course, a tower. Was kidnapped there by an evil wizard. So it's a very simple story. But IBM came to my husband Ken, who was running Sierra at the time, probably a year or two after we were selling Wizard and the Princess, and they asked if they could publish the game under their own label, IBM, and they gave it a different name. They called it Adventures in Serenia. Because that's the fantasy land that the Wizard and the Princess was in, was the land of Serenia, and we gave them the rights to publish Adventures in Serenia on their IBM computers, and that was probably in 80, 81, 82, and so like in 83 they came to us. They had a little personal computer they were wanting to release. And they had a secret term for it. They called it the Peanut, that's secret name. And they came to us and said, we want to have Roberta write a game that's like Adventures in Serenia, which was also my Wizard and the Princess. And we want her to design a game that's very much like that for this new secret personal computer that we are developing for the home market, and the secret name is Peanut, and that's all we knew at the time. But it came out later to be PC Junior, and so that they said that's what they want, and I said, well, okay, well, so I mean that was fairly easy for me because I had the since I had done Wizard and the Princess, I knew it was going to be more fairy tales and myths and legends that I could put together in a game and have a magical kingdom, or and just kind of come up with sort of the typical fairy tale type story, and that's what I did. But what I was able to do, the thing that was really groundbreaking for Sierra and really for the computer game industry at the time, was even though the PC Junior did not do well itself, it really didn't. But it could do so much more than the Apple II, which is really the only computer. I think I could be wrong on that, and I don't want to say for sure, but we basically did most of our games on the Apple II up to that time. And we really had pushed the envelope on the Apple II as much as we could with our adventure games the way they were, but we couldn't have any animation. We couldn't have a third character that we could, walk around. It had very limited sound. It had limited memory and RAM. It had limited colors. So we really had pushed the Apple II about as far as we could go. And PC Junior the IBM had added these things. So whereas the Apple II had I think 8 colors, including black and white, this had, I think, 16 colors, if memory serves, 128K of RAM. It had the capability of animation. It had more capability of sound effects, music. So I was very excited about that. But that's how I came to do the first King's Quest.
And that's how you changed the industry again with the first animated graphic adventure, which was really groundbreaking. I mean, it's safe to assume that without King's Quest, without this little guy walking around, we wouldn't have adventure games from other developers. I mean, it's quite obvious that when George Lucas created his own studio, and of course he hired some huge talents like Ron Gilbert and David Fox, they had something to surpass. Let's say they had a standard. Say, okay, this is what Sierra is doing, so how about we do something to improve the genre? But really, I mean, my generation that played King's Quest and we realized the potential of that game and how it changed that. Because personally, I've always been an adventure fan, and both text adventures and the animated adventures. And I could really feel that the Sierra games and the Lucasfilm games, and from all the other studios, probably 1 or 2 games, but the soul of King's Quest was unsurpassed. And this is what we're watching here is from The Pearls of Rosella, King's Quest 4. It's one of my favorite, to be quite honest. And okay, I'm going to give some spoilers here. She's not married. Rosella is not marrying the Prince Charming in this game. She's actually rejecting it. Which, I mean, usually we expect from stories for the princess to marry the charming prince, but plot twist.
No, I didn't have her marry. No, she met a young man by the name of Edgar towards the end of this game, but she didn't marry him. No, in fact, I think that I have left the King's Quest series with Rosella unmarried still. I think. Poor thing. No, maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I think she's still unmarried. Comes up and is going to continue the King's Quest series. Yeah, she's still out there on her own.
She just was break away the stereotypes.
Well, she was young. She had a lot of life left in her to figure stuff out on her own.
Yes, and of course, You broke again some ground with Phantasmagoria. When we're starting the multimedia revolution and using real actors for the games, you heavily invested in Phantasmagoria, and it was an amazing game for its time. Highly acclaimed for the technical side of that.
Yeah, that was that game probably for me was the pinnacle of what I could do or what we could do at the time. Now that, things are different, of course. Now computers are much more powerful and, and can do a lot more. But that game, I wanted to experiment. Well, I wanted to experiment in a couple of ways. I've always been sort of fascinated with emotions and computer games. And I know that in the case of the game we just saw with Rosella, Perils of Rosella, that was King's Quest IV, it actually, the opening scene, I usually would have an opening scene to set the story, and where King Graham, he falls to the ground, and he's maybe going to die, actually got some people crying. We were at CES in Las Vegas that year when we were showing off King's Quest IV, and it was just about ready to ship. And we had a big kind of theater room, and we were showing that opening scene that you just showed. And there were actually some people, some women in the audience that began to cry. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting, to think that King Graham could die. And that shows how people can really get into these games and really start feeling a part of it, because you really are in it. You are traveling through it, and you're deciding what to do. You feel yourself more a part of this story than if you're just reading a book or watching a movie. And so I became kind of fascinated with the idea of emotions and computer games after that. And I, for some reason, I became interested in the idea of, if a computer game can scare you, it can make you cry. I knew that, but can it scare you? And I became obsessed with trying to figure that out. I mean, and I'm not I'd read books like Stephen King, and just, Shirley Jackson, and not a lot, but, or, just ghost stories. I'd always sort of been interested in things like that, a little bit of paranormal things. And so I decided I was going to see if I could write a horror story. And I mean the word horror in the meaning that it is very horrible, very scary. I wanted to see if a computer game could actually scare people. And but I'd never written anything like that before. And I gave myself about 6 months to learn how to write suspense and on horror and that kind of thing, to get an idea of what is it about a story that can frighten people so much. And I gave myself about 6 months to figure that out. And then I began to write, and I wrote the game Phantasmagoria. I made my my character, my main character, the avatar that you are playing, another female. I think I felt and feel very comfortable having a female protagonist. And I decided we had to have actors. And the reason that I decided on actors for this game is because I did not think that a computer game, and I could be wrong, but at the time, I did not think that a computer game, an animated character, could scare people and to the point where they would really be fearful. Because in order to be really frightened, you know, if you're watching a movie and you see an actor or actress, I always say, like, going down a long dark hallway and there's a door in the distance, and you know, you've been told through the story that there could be something really bad behind that door, and you know, the character heard a noise or something and they want to check it out, and you know, as the viewer to the movie, don't go there, you know, don't do that, don't be stupid. But yet they do, right? They do. And you could feel it in yourself watching that. And you see their hand go to the doorknob and, you know, want to turn it. And you are beginning to get some feelings of fear and emotion in yourself just watching that. And I said to myself, I don't think that a computer animated character, unless it was super realistic, which at the time could not be, would give you enough empathy, because empathy is what you needed, and actors can give you that. They have the subtleness of their voice, their gestures, their expressions, to where you can clue in on it as another fellow human being. And so I just decided that without actors, I did not think it was possible to scare people with a computer game. So that's how we had to figure out how to put actors at that time into, and we did not use real sets like you might have in a movie or a TV show, you know, an actual set. What we did is we had a 3D rendered world, 3D rendered house, and a town surrounding it, all 3D rendered, beautiful high res. And we had to figure out how to get the actors into that 3D rendered world. That was the most difficult part of the project, is to figure out how to do that with software, cameras, and blue screening and all of that. But it was very exciting and very fun, and it worked. I had a lot of people tell me over the years how that game just scared them to death, and they couldn't play it at night, things like that.
Just to add to that, because I'm not going to ask every question, I'm sure there's going to be questions in the Q&A later. At the time, we had missed one of the first games on Venture Games on CD-ROM. And of course, 7th Guest and 11th Hour, which were some of the first CD-ROM based games with the 4 games. But Phantasmagoria, it was the first, okay, missed something else. Phantasmagoria was the first that really had a soul in it. And the other two more seemed like, let's say, a demo. But Phantasmagoria was really something else, and it really took a very good storyteller to create that story. But that's for the Q&A. Just to conclude this part, of course, you're still very engaged in the industry, and you came full circle to the first game that motivated you to be engaged in storytelling. And this is a colossal cave. And I've got 2 systems here. I've got a PSVR 2. Our audience here today can test it, and PS4 for those who are not keen on VR to try the game. So if I may, just one last question before we go to the Q&A. Why did you go back to this game instead of creating an original game?
Yeah, that's everybody asks that, and you know, sometimes when when they ask me that, I feel, you know, a little bit of this sort of sadness people have, that it's why you know, why couldn't you have done King's Quest 9, for instance? The last game I did on the King's Quest series was King's Quest 8, Mask of Eternity. Well, one reason for that is we don't own the King's Quest brand anymore. When we sold Sierra, we sold all the rights, and so we own none of it. So really couldn't do that, even if we wanted. Right now, the company that owns all the old Sierra line of games is Microsoft, and I do know they probably would let me do a you know, the next King's Quest if I asked them. In fact, I know for sure that they would, but I don't know. I think, you know, I think I'm not, you know, wanting to do that now. But why this one then? This is the game that started me on my with my career as an adventure game designer, and it was the game that I played in late 1979, early 1980. I was in my early 20s, and my husband Ken was a programmer working in the Los Angeles area. I just had my second baby and was not working at the time. And he was doing some contract programming for Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, and just doing some contract programming for them for their accounting system or something like that. And he went in, he decided he was going to go into their, you know, that was a big mainframe IBM computer. He was going to go into the hard drive and try to figure out what other files are in there, which is kind of what programmers do sometimes. And he found this file of games that was in the Children's Hospital computer, you know, corporate computer. And he saw there was this game called Advent, ADVENT, which is short for adventure. And he said, "What is that?" And he clicked on it, and he saw that it was like a interactive story. It was text, and that you could talk to it by 1 or 2 word commands, like go north, open door, look up, you know, or whatever. And you could guide yourself through this world, which turned out to be a cave system, by just by typing in 1 and 2 word sentences. It was like an interactive story. It wasn't the story itself wasn't really fleshed out as this great story, but it was a great exploration, where you start with in a forest, and you can gather objects and clues, and I could talk to the game and it would answer me back. It was written by a gentleman by the name of William Crowther, and hello?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah, Will Crowther. And he was working for a company at the time that was developing the internet, surprisingly. I mentioned that if you play the game Colossal Cave 3D, there's a little part up front with me on this old 70s style TV set, where you click on it, I come up and I kind of explain the background of this game. But he worked for a company that was developing the internet at the time, was one of 4 programmers. The military at the Pentagon had come to this company. It was a very high level programming company. I forget the name of it, but I say it at the beginning of this game. And he was working also on the idea of AI, artificial intelligence. So he was putting his ideas about the internet and also AI into this. His idea being that you could type in, using your keyboard, into this game, and it would answer you. as much as it possibly could, so that you get this feeling that you really are communicating with the computer. And that's what really drew me in to this game. And so when Ken and I decided during COVID, like everybody, we were stuck at home and we couldn't go anywhere or do much of anything. We thought, well, this could be a good time and we could just do a new project. Just do a project. And he wanted to get back into programming, and he wanted to program 3D graphics, 3D animation. And I suggested this game. I said, you know, this game is, I've always thought this game was very, very elegantly designed. Not so much from a story standpoint, but the strategy behind it. At first, it gives you the sense that you're just exploring a cave, but as you do it, you get deeper and deeper into it. You find out that it's a big fantasy world, and with many characters and a lot of strategy. And I said to him, this game's already designed. It was the very first game that got me started with my career, and Will Crowther inspired me. And I felt like I wanted to complete that circle and go back and do something for him. He's still alive. And I have a wonderful picture of him playing this game with on a Quest 2 headset.
Yes.
And when I saw that picture, his daughter took that picture and sent it to me, and I just almost, you know, collapsed in tears. I mean, because he, you know, I've had a lot of people say to me that, you know, you have inspired me in my career. You know, when I play your games, then I knew I wanted to be a computer programmer, computer designer, computer animator. But he inspired me. That's why we did this game.
It's fantastic. So I'd like to thank you for this part, and please stay with us as we move to the final part of the question and answer section.
Okay, you just want me to stay right here?
Let's say 150 and 70.
How many?
Pardon?
You want me to stay right here, or?
Yes, for the question and answer. I'm sure there's a book here.
I'll be right here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams, for your presentation and your contribution in the field. So we're going to have a Q&A session with our speakers from today's event. So we have Ms. Lorianne Cole, Ms. Roberta Williams, Alexandros here. We have Elena and Vicky. We have Panagiota as well. So we're going to open up the floor to anyone, and also Mr. Cole is going to be part of the Q&A session. We're going to open up the floor for anyone who wants to ask a question for one or more of our speakers. Yes. Sure.
Thank you so much for the presentations from both of you. Were really exciting and fascinating. I just want to ask, just like you are storytellers, I'm sure that you are also dreamers. So when 30-year-old Roberta and Corey were sitting down in Dorian and they were thinking about the future of the industry and how will game develop in the future, how closely does it align with today's state of the industry?
Oh, how close does it align to today's state of what?
Today's state of the industry.
Oh, just thinking about the future and how you're going to push the envelope, I'm assuming you mean. Well, I was lucky, and I would be interested in what everybody else has to say about that too. I was lucky in that I was happy. I hate to admit this, but why not? I happen to be married to a very, very good programmer. And so Ken Williams, I was able to have long discussions with him to find out from his perspective as a programmer and as a techie, his thoughts on where the industry is going and was going to be going. And we had many talks about that, and together, we would decide, how to take the next iteration of, say, one of my games, say King's Quest, as the example of, okay, we did this, now where do we go for the next one, and then the next one. And we would discuss it. And one of the very first things I'd say, you have to give me the parameters that I have to work with. And he had just wonderful programmers. At this time, Sierra was getting pretty big, and we had some of the best programmers working for us in the industry. And so he would say, well, you have to do the next King's Quest, as an example. And I would say, well, I know that you want me to do this, and I know that we have to up the ante. We have to add more. We have to do more. What are the parameters? What are the new parameters you see coming down the pike? And he would say, well, there, I don't even, there's this new computer's coming out, or whatever's coming out, or this sound card, a music card, or whatever that you could plug into your PC, all these things, they're coming down the pike. And so we have to build a game around that. So, but that was always great for me, because I always wanted to advance the story and advance the look and feel of the game and the sound, because at heart, I am a storyteller, and in order to tell a really, really good story, I want it to be as emotional as it can be, and so that's how we did it. Is just Ken and I working together, and I had that fortuitous ability to have and work with somebody like Ken.
Well, in our case, Sierra shaped this future. All of the things, all the innovations that King's Quest was coming up with, and all of these games that we were putting out really helped push the PC market into mass marketing. I mean, people bought computers to play our games. And so therefore, this future, this now, was all shaped by the things that we did in the past.
Now, I would say today, it's easier than ever to make this type of game. There are a lot of tools out there. There's Adventure Game Studio. There's Unity, which is considerably harder to use, but very powerful. So you can make games as an independent. The hard part, and what Ken and his family did really well back in the 80s and 90s, was figure out how to sell them. So today you can make a game. Trying to make money from a game is hard, but as an outlet of creative expression, the tools are there, and it's wonderful. You'll want to meet people at gatherings like this at the museum, and put a team together, because games are made by a team. Roberta mentioned that she and Ken, Lori and I, Lori was the artist and the writer, and I was the programmer, mathematician, and puzzle person. So between the two of us, we made one Sierra game director.
Yeah, I didn't. I'd like to just go back real quick. I don't want to jump on anybody else, but just real quick. I didn't finish. I forgot the second part of your question, which was, how does it relate to today's industry? And Corey is very right that there are so many tools now. I mean, that's when we start working on Colossal Cave. We realized we didn't have to come up with our own tools in software that we had to write. for ourselves in order to develop a game, because now they exist. You know, Unity, we used Unity for Colossal Cave, and it's got all the tools. There's Adventure Creator is another set of adventure game software tools that you can use to create a game. And there's Unreal, and you know, so there's a lot now that you don't have to be married to or be yourself, you know, this great programmer, you know, so that you can program all the little, you know, the routines and the software for being able to do a game. That's a big difference.
And one question? Yeah.
So, hi, huge fan. Well, I've been a gamer for most of my life. I'm not that old, but yeah, it's been quite some time. And I was curious, based on what he asked as well, what's your opinion on the current status of the gaming industry? I mean, for me, I think 2010s was a very good decade. I think we had some soulful games, some masterful games with great creative expression. But as time goes by, I feel it's getting worse. What's your take on this? Both of them.
There's certainly some great games out now. I've been addicted to World of Warcraft since a few years after it came out. So that's where I spend most of my time. But the games are getting more and more beautiful and realistic. They are spending, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars on a game, whereas our biggest games at Sierra were a few million, probably Phantasmagoria. And all of our games are under $1 million. But the graphics values are amazing. The gameplay, I think, tends to be a little bit too much for my taste to the twitch and the fast movement and so on. And I actually enjoy games like the New York Times Wordle, where you're just sitting there and taking your time and guessing a word. Okay, that is a game.
I like that.
And it's all about making the player in charge instead of, presenting them with a movie on the screen.
There are other game companies out there that are still doing things like Sierra. I mean, Wadjet Eye keeps coming out with adventure games almost every year. And it's just that it's hard to find the games that you might want to play. It's not that there aren't some out there.
Yeah, if you only go to the ones with the $1 billion advertising budgets, then you'll only be playing the Sony and Activision, Blizzard, and so on games. Then you're really restricting yourself. But if you look at the independent games, go up on Steam, go up on GOG.com, and the Nintendo Switch. Look for independent games up there. You'll find there's a huge variety of very interesting games.
That's true. I'm interested in the gentleman that asked the question. He said, in his opinion, it's getting worse.
Well, if you take a look at the past decade, we had some games that had. I mean, you felt they're different. I mean, if we take for single player games, I'm not going to go into PvP like WoW. I mean, even WoW hasn't been fresh for the past, I don't know, at least a decade. So if you take a look at the 2010s, we had the latest Zelda games. So the first game that it was completely free to explore. We had the God of War, outstanding storytelling. But if you take a look at this decade, you see that most of them, even single player games, for example, you see Dragon's Dogma, a huge game coming with microtransactions. You had to pay to teleport. You see games that, instead of focusing on the story and the narrative, for example, games like, Senua's Hellblade, it's a rare case of something that trying to tell you something, to inspire you about something. But most of them lack those things and try to see how they can monetize. Even single-player games, not to mention multiplayer games, which is usually extremely worse. And you see those aspects of storytelling and soulful games that you immerse yourself in it more in Asian developers like Japan or China or so on, and you don't see this so much on American developers. So I was curious to see what's your take after actually living through everything, being there when everything started, and see how they're evolving. That's why I was curious for your opinion.
The real difference between then and now is that the companies then were run by the people who wanted to make those games, who really had the passion and the excitement and really thought this was what they wanted to do. And the game companies out there, for the most part, all the commercial ones, they're run by corporate managers and businessmen who don't care about games.
They have one goal in mind, and that is the almighty drachma.
Well, what I would say about that is the corporate companies now, the teams they're creating these games are huge. And one reason why I think Sierra's and back in the industry back then, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, is that we always focused on a designer. Primarily, and we did it because we really felt like this designer had the idea of what that designer wanted to do, their story or their game or however it was, and they had passion about it, that it was their thing. And so for Sierra, the designer was king or queen, however you want to say it. And we really would stress that and promote the designer. So there would be me, it'd be Lori and Corey, it'd be Jane Jensen, and people would get to know, oh, that's a Jane Jensen game, or whatever. And but it would be good, and it would have the story behind it, and the interest and the emotion, because it is one person's vision. And when I say one person, it's not that there wasn't a team. It wasn't that there wasn't other talent. Your artists, the music people or programmers, but the designer was the one who had the yes or no say in it. This is my game. My name is on it, and this is the way we're going to do it. I will listen to everybody else, of course, but ultimately it's going to come down to me and what I decide. And but in today's world, it's just huge teams, hundreds of people, and you want to say, but who's the designer of this game? Who's really the one? Is it like it's a director? Who is it? And I'm not sure there's really a good answer on that. So I think a little bit of the humanity and the emotion and the storytelling is gone when you've heard the whole thing, too many cooks spoil the broth. I think that might be some of the things that's going on.
Another way to look at it is that when you're talking about these huge games with huge teams, that cost the companies huge amounts of money, is they know they need to get that back, so they spend a lot more money promoting the games. So when you hear about games today, you see only a fraction of them. There are thousands of new games appearing every month, but you only hear of about 5 of them. And the 5 you hear about are the ones with the gigantic budgets. So you only get to see if you're only playing those games, you're only seeing the type of games that are made with the huge teams. So look for the ones from the small teams. Look for the ones from Cygnus and
like Colossal Cave.
Yeah, or like Hero U and Summer Days at Hero U. Then you will see very different kinds of games. And Lori mentioned Dave Gilbert with Wadjet Eye. He has a game called Unavowed, distinctly different from the Avowed, which is one of the mega huge games. But Unavowed is a small game that you might like.
That was very good, Corey. That's very nice of you to mention everybody else. That's great.
Thank you so much. We have another question from the participant here.
Okay, I'm going to get the microphone up because I'm one of the people who actually played your games when you were making them. I'm not going to bend like the previous person. I will ask a question, but because you said the question makes you sad, why did you repeat something? I want to say that the question never occurred to me, and I was kind of surprised because you had the imagination to do things for which there was no technology, and you pushed the technology and invented the technology, and I don't know what, and now we have the technology. So I think the first thing I would be doing in your position is to get the actual dream I had to the full using the technology that I did not have then. So if this is what you're feeling, I get it. It's not everybody's first question, the one that makes you sad, like you said. My question now, though, is when I first played a LucasArts game, when they started making games, I was shocked because I was not dying. Because I was so very used with your games where if I did something wrong, oops, I'm dead. Or maybe I crossed some river and I am unable to go back and I'm stuck and I don't know why I'm stuck. And it's because I did not pick a thing that I cannot pick anymore because I have crossed the river and the game is somewhere else. Did you know how cruel your games were to us? And was this on purpose? Yeah, we have an agreement here. Was it on purpose or was it a result because we had the tabletop games and you can die there and it was, part of translating those into games? Or was it a conscious decision? I mean, you can answer freely. I'm not going to hate you. I admired you too much. So you tortured us, but you still gave us the best part of our childhood. But was it on purpose?
What you mean to die?
Yeah, the whole unforgiving nature of the first game.
Oh, unforgiving nature.
Completely.
Actually, I think I can help Roberta out a little with this.
Please do.
Yeah.
There were two things.
Yes.
One is that this was the dawn of narrative storytelling game, and we were all making it up as we went along. Certainly Roberta was. And the second reason is technical, that the games had very little memory, very little disk space, and so you could only handle a few options. So if a player tried to go to, do something off the wall, like, eat the crocodile, then what are you going to do? You could, use your very limited budget to have the player wrestling with the crocodile. Well, you can't do that for everything. So what you do instead is to say, oh, the crocodile eats you, game over. It was an easy shortcut for handling all the things that were off the track of the real story.
So basically it was because getting the error, you cannot do that, was getting too repetitive. So we had as an alternative that you die.
It was a shortcut to keep you from doing that. Not necessarily the best shortcut, but
it's all we could do at the time.
Yeah, the very limitations of the medium.
Well, also, when I, as I've already said, that I was inspired by the original adventure, Colossal Cave, and you could die in that. So when I first did my mystery house, especially being a murder mystery, which is what it was, you could die because you would be trying to solve a murder mystery. Well, and the murderer was looking for you too in the game. So not only did you have to figure out who's the story was there's like 10 people and you in this old Victorian house, and you're trying to find a treasure in this house, and but everybody is looking for the treasure and somebody is killing everybody else. And so your goal was not only to find the treasure, but to figure out who's killing. So you'd be playing a game, you'd go into the kitchen and there'd be, one of your people who's, searching for the treasure too, though dead, laying there, with a clue. And then you go somewhere else and, another one, dead over here, with another clue. And so, but the murderer is looking for you too. So you're going to die if you don't figure it out. So for me, it was just sort of between Colossal Cave at the time, you could die. And then my second game was a murder mystery. You could die because that's part of the story. And so for me, it just sort of Corey is right in many ways that from a programming standpoint, people can try all kinds of things. When you're designing these games, you have to try to think of everything that people might want to try to do in any given location in the game. But you can't think of everything. That's impossible. So at some point you have to kind of go, okay, that's it, and that's sort of the way it is. I mean, if you think about, if you're playing a board game, you still die. You just don't think of it that way.
Yeah, you lose the game. Yeah.
You lose the game, right? You're like, okay, you're out. Take your piece and go. And everybody else will keep playing for a while. So it's really not much more than that, really, when you think about it.
If I may, Mrs. Williams, in King's Quest 2, there is a path with poisonous thorns leading to the castle of Dracula. And the funny thing is that I thought that the only way to reach that was to die, restore, make a small step, die, restore. Then, and I think I restored the game 40, 50 times before I reached the castle of Dracula. And then a friend of mine comes and says, did you reach the castle of Dracula? I said, yes. It was easy part. What do you mean easy part? Yeah, you find something, you rub it on your body, and you just walk there. It gives me hope.
Oh,
Oh my God. Yeah.
I don't know. No, I mean, I think as you do the job, you get better at it too. You have to remember, we were the only ones doing it, and until LucasArts and Infocom with text adventure games, but and we didn't have any training. None of us went to college to learn how to design a computer game. So
a bad thing. I'm not blaming you, but it was a thing, and it did come from board games for some part. So that was curiosity, but I'm not blaming you. It's how we were used to playing, and we did have save files. After we got over the 10 save files, we were good. But
yeah, no, I know. So I'm
not blaming you for anything.
No problem. Yeah, but I think, but one thing you are right on is that sometimes at the beginning, I think I got better as I did more games, and I'm sure Lori and Corey feel that same way, and others, Allo, doing Leisure Suit Larry, and we learn as we did it, oh yeah, I guess we kind of did put him in a difficult position over there, and maybe we probably could have thought about that a little bit better, but then we would get better, on the next game, and we'd get a little better, and because we were kind of inventing this whole thing ourselves as we were going along.
No, Roberta, you didn't get better. See, what you have to remember is you never say you made a mistake. You say, I meant to do that.
Yeah, it was a secret puzzle. Yes,
that's right. But we all learned from each other. When LucasArts started doing adventure games inspired by Sierra, one of the first things they reacted to, and Ron Gilbert and company, was we don't like the depth of the adventure game. So we'll make games where you cannot die. And in Tinker and Like Island, there's only one way to die in the game, and you really have to work at it. So that was their reaction, and ours was kind of the same way. Let me speaker. So ours was kind of the same way, as we learned from our predecessors. We were doing the early role-playing games, and we learned from games like Wizardry and Dungeon Master and Ultima, and we said, okay, we don't like the way that Ultima has no real characters, and so we're going to make our characters good. And we focused in on one thing that we thought we could do better. But you learn as you go along, and you learn from other developers.
Yeah. Yes.
And just like to add that we've got with us since the beginning almost, RJ Mical, the co-creator of the Commodore Amiga, Francois Lionet, STOS BASIC, and Mr. David Pleasance. He was the last director of Commodore UK. So you got a lot of celebrities participating as well here.
Have any other questions from the audience here?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can ask them.
The present we have started working on the microphone.
Mr. Pleasance, we can't hear you well. So
Mr. Pleasance, we can't hear you. Can you write that on the message, please?
Just unmute.
I hit that static problem. Maybe like plug in the wrong jack.
Mr. Pleasance, if you can hear us, because we can't hear you when you unmute, so maybe could you write your question in the chat, please?
Okay.
Mr. Pleasance, there seems to be an issue with your microphone, and there's a lot of loud noise when you're mute.
Maybe he can't hear it. Maybe he can't hear it. It's okay. Mr. Pleasance was the last director of Commodore UK, and he's very knowledgeable about the golden era of innovation. Until we resolve Mr. Pleasant's microphone,
So a quick one from me again. So one of the many things that you guys pioneered was the use of Easter eggs. And I was wondering about the motivation of including like this secrets inside your games at that time. I mean, now it's obvious that you have a huge community over the internet and everything propagates very quickly, so it's easy for people to discuss. Those days, I guess, was a bit much harder for gamers to discuss this information. So what was your actual motivation for doing that? Thank you.
I didn't have any motivation to doing that personally. But they programmers essentially, sometimes the artists would put in Easter eggs, and they would kind of sneak them in. You know, if I found them, I generally would want to get rid of them, which maybe is a mistake now, you know, when looking back on it, like, you know, they're actually kind of fun. But I didn't quite trust them at the time because I didn't know what kind of things the programmers are going to put in that maybe it may not have been of the, you know, nicer, nicer things. So I
like the stand-in death messages in King's Quest IV just before it shipped. Had a one of your games.
I don't even know that I know all of them. So yeah, I was although I was a very good QA'er of my own games, and I went before we would release them, we all would play our games, you know, over and over and over and over and over again, and I would look for all those things, and if I found them out, but again, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, that was always my response to it.
Lori and I went the opposite direction. Games are made by a team, and you know, so the writer can't write everything.
Well, also our games were humorous, and Easter eggs tend to be funny, and they do not break the mood of a humorous game. But when you're trying to tell a serious story, you do not want some bozo clown suddenly popping up in the screen. And in our games, we could get away with it.
And actually, our developers kind of shaped our games. So Bob Fischbach was one of our first programmers, and he wrote the first puns in the game. And Lori and I said, "Oh, we didn't know we could put puns in the game." And we both love puns, so we said, "Okay, I guess from now on we'll write puns for the game."
So yes, we allowed the teams to be creative because we were working with them directly. We could see what they were doing. We knew that they weren't going to break our game or do something so crazy that you know, it would take people out of the game. So we could have those Easter eggs and encourage them from our creative people so that they got a chance to participate in the game process too.
And every once in a while we played the Easter egg game ourselves. We decided, oh, those guys are, you know, our developers are having fun. Why can't we? So in Quest for Glory 3, Lori and I were both fans of Cerberus the Aardvark, or Cerberus the Earth Pig. And so we put in got the artist to draw on Aardvark and did a whole series of, storyline jokes about the Aardvark, which had nothing to do with the game.
It is rather onerous when it's your game and you're the one that, your name is on the box, and all, God, there's no boxes for games today. That really bothered me a lot when we developed Colossal Cave. I said, well, there's no box, anyway, that's an aside. But when you're the one and it's all around you or you or your spouse or whatever, you do want to get your team involved as much as possible, because it's just too much for one person to kind of come up with on their own. And so having a very talented team working with you is very much an advantage, and you do want to encourage that.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Ms. Williams and Ms. Cole. I mean, given that we're hosting this event today to celebrate females in the industry, and you particularly, well, the game development industry has long been male dominated. So when you were starting in this area, did you face any challenges being females, and how did you resolve those, and do you think that the industry has evolved since then?
Well, I'll go first, since I was the first one. And say, again, as I've said, I was very lucky in that I happened to be married to a very great programmer and also businessman, Ken Williams. And so we worked together, he and I, at the very beginning. The first few games were just the two of us, and so therefore there was no real computer game industry per se at that time, 1980, 81. So it wasn't like it belonged to anybody, like guys, or whatever. There really wasn't one. And Sierra was one of the companies early on that was building the computer game industry. And I was right there, right there in the beginning. I mean, because I was the one that developed Mystery House and that game. So I didn't have any competition as far as any men to compete against, I guess you might, if you want to put it that way. And then as we grew Sierra, we just brought in women and men and everybody. We didn't think in terms of oh, you're a woman, and so we're going to hire you, or we're not going to hire you, or you're a man, and we're not. You know, we were just wanting to create really great games. And I think that women probably felt maybe very comfortable being with us because it was sort of started, I guess you could say, by a woman. But I never experienced any issues personally.
And of course, I went to work for Sierra, and Sierra was the best possible place for me to be working at that time because it had everything. And there was no problem with being a woman. We had women doing every kind of role then.
Oh yeah.
We had
Sierra was
programmers, and we had artists, but we still had them, and so therefore it wasn't a problem. And it's always is a problem other places. We know from people that left Sierra and went to other companies, there was a problem with the way the men treated the women, with they didn't respect them as much, but Sierra was just the best place to be.
And I think too, we were located up in the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas in California. So we were away from Silicon Valley and the other areas of, the high-tech areas. And so we were very isolated, and we just who we were, and that was that. I wish I could say, yes, we had, all these problems, but we didn't.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, you were maybe one of the few companies at the time that were very inclusive in the workplace. So that's wonderful, and congratulations for that.
Well, thank you.
If I may add one last thing, 2 weeks ago when we had here online, RJ Mical, he's here with us. We couldn't have him too yet, and I'm so glad to see here. And Mr. David Fox from Lucasfilm, and of course, every other time that I talk with Ron Gilbert and other developers, they always show huge respect for Sierra, always. And this is incredible because you were there first, you opened the road for everything, and well, whatever they achieved, they did that by standing on the shoulders of your company. Thank you. Thank you for giving us an amazing childhood.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt? Can anybody hear me now?
Oh, yes, that's much better.
I've just changed computer for you guys. So I hope you can hear me. Anyway, yes. Hello to everybody, and a special hello to my friend RJ. How are you, mate? Yeah, it's good, really good to see you, buddy. Long time no see. So sorry, I apologize for the technical problems, but all solved now. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to Roberta. I didn't listen to everything because I was on another call, various other things, but I noticed that I represent Commodore from the UK and actually globally, but I noticed that you never mentioned Commodore at all in any of your conversations, and I find that really staggering considering that the 64 is the biggest selling home computer in the world.
I'm sorry. I'm not honestly, I'm not a big computer person myself, which sounds strange to say, considering that I'm, this great, I don't know, game designer, I guess. But I basically have only, from my personal sense of what I'm developing on, the computer that I'm developing on at that moment was either an Apple II or a PC. And that was it for me. And all of the other, and we absolutely did put our games on many platforms, including Commodore 64. But I was never involved in any of that. that those were where we would put them on a new, I would develop the initial game. That's the way to say it. I would develop the initial game, say it was, one of the King's Quests on a PC. And then it would go to other teams of programmers to translate them to other platforms, like the Commodore 64. So I just didn't think of it. Am I being heard?
Sure, no, I don't.
David, my first job at Sierra is I wasn't actually brought in to make games. I converted Roberta's King's Quest 4 and some other games over to the Atari ST, and then I worked with a intern. I don't think he was even paid, but he was a college student who came in for a summer, and he took my code for the Atari ST and converted it for the Commodore Amiga. So that it was actually the exact same code running, for the most part, running on the Atari ST and the Amiga.
Yeah. So I think, like me and Lori, we were moving on to the next game, as far as the story and what we wanted it to be. And so we had teams of programmers to translate the games into the other computers and platforms. And so we didn't pay that much attention to that. I hate to say it in that way. But
in some ways, I totally understand it, because
I mean, we did it. We did translate them to there,
yeah.
but
the fact of the matter is that Commodore, there was a massive divide between Commodore Europe and Commodore USA. In fact, we used to call Commodore USA sales prevention officers. Because they were terrible.
Yeah, Mr. Pleasance, 2 weeks ago when we did the book presentation, when we were focused on the computers, we paid a tribute to Commodore, and we even highly praised the Amiga. It's not an evolutionary machine, but it's a revolutionary machine. So I think we can have this discussion about platforms later, and we are going to do an event on that. But I think today we focused on storytellers, and we focused on incredible storytellers. Let's get the focus here, please.
I will say that Lori and I were inspired by some of the early games on the Commodore PET. I had an 8K PET, and it had some absolutely brilliant games that today you could not imagine were done in a total of 8,000 bytes of memory with a cassette loading them in. But we took some inspiration from that.
Sure. Yeah. I'd love to have a word from RJ, because he's the man behind the Amiga. I think I'd love to hear you say something.
I'll say this. We were talking earlier about Easter eggs, and I've had a long history with Easter eggs over the years. And there's good ones. There's happy Easter eggs. I love happy Easter eggs. I've been part of embedding them when you intend for people to find them someday. I love that stuff. But I've also been around when there are Easter eggs that were naughty, nasty things that ought not to have existed, and wish that they hadn't. And then there's the in-between one that I've always loved the most. It was from SimCity, where the one guy buried a gay rights parade into SimCity on Gay Rights Day, and it was just that one time, but a bunch of people with pink triangles came out and marched on that one day, and I just love that. That's my kind of Easter egg.
Actually, it's all about people having fun, and we want the players to have fun, but the development team also has to have fun, because otherwise you get a bland, boring, flat game. But if everybody is really excited about what they're doing and passionate and having fun, they make better games.
Yeah.
So I'll throw this in. When we did the Lynx, the Atari Lynx, one of the game developers that was in the original batch of games put a hidden level into the game that would be real hard to find. You'd have to notice your shots weren't being stopped by the wall at one point and stuff. And you got into this hidden level. And we all knew he was doing it. It was just this fun, one of those things that we liked. But we let him do it even though it was against company policy, but we let him do it anyway. And to thank us for letting him do it anyway, some of the enemies that you had to fight in the level were Dave Needle and me. Our heads came rotating, and just our heads were like we were the enemies that you had to defeat. That was fun.
If I may add here, the first Easter egg, recorded Easter egg, is on the adventure game on the Atari VCS, and but it was a very loose, let's say, based on the text adventure. And the reason they did that was because Atari at the time, it was prohibiting its developers from writing their names on the game, on the box, on anything. They were treating them as garbage. It's nothing. So that's why the developer, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. He put an Easter egg there, and once you click on a very specific part of the game, just one pixel, specific pixel, you had his name featured on the game. So that's a very recorded one. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and it was incredible, and it's nice seeing RJ and Mr. Pleasance here, and hope to have you in another event, and hopefully we manage to get you to come to Cyprus as well. We'd love that.
And also congratulations to the speakers. Really well done. Yay.
Laurie and I actually did a game set on the Greek Isles, Crete in particular, Quest for Glory 5. And we have always wanted to go out there. We almost had a trip scheduled for September to go to Athens and Crete. But yes, we definitely would like to come out to Kypros. Is that how you pronounce it? Kypros?
Yes.
Cyprus.
So we would definitely like to visit Cyprus.
Ken and
we have some huge fans there, we know.
Ken and I went to Crete this last September. September 24th. We were just there in Crete. I'd always wanted to go to Crete, and I loved it. You've got to go for sure. And now I want to go to Cyprus.
All right. Giving you here.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to be at the event in Wall Township, New Jersey, April the 3rd, 4th, and 5th? It's the RCF East. It's basically an Amiga meeting. I think RJ is going, aren't you, mate?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to go. I'm supposed to go, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to. My months have gotten all jammed up. I've got a suddenly pregnant daughter and all kinds of things happening in my life. Yay!
All right. Thank you all for being here, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ναι.